Hamas is expected to release the first hostages under a Gaza ceasefire deal on Sunday, according to the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. More than 46,000 Palestinians have been killed in the conflict, which started in October 2023, when Hamas-led militants killed almost 1,500 Israelis. In other news, the man who served 14 years in jail for the murder of schoolboy Jimmy Mizzen has been recalled to prison for breaching his licence conditions. Jake Fahry killed Jimmy and in 2008 was sentenced to 14 years behind bars. The 35-year-old was released on licence in June 2023 following his 14-year term, but recalled yesterday morning. Part of the rapper's parole agreement includes being barred from entering the Greenwich Borough of London. But in music videos found by the Sun newspaper and watched by his victim's family, Fahry, who goes by the alias 10, was filmed in front of Canary Wharf inside that area. Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy says the BBC should reflect on the decision to showcase the drill rapper, who was promoted on their One Extra radio station. In other news, the Prime Minister says a defence and security deal with Poland will bring closer collaboration between the UK and its eastern ally. Sir Keir Starmer continues his visit to Europe, promising to take Britain's partnership with Poland to the next level. Meeting with his Polish counterpart Donald Tusk, the pair are expected to discuss how the countries can combat people smuggling gangs and Russian aggression. Yesterday, Sir Keir Starmer signed a 100-year deal with Ukraine while visiting the war-torn country. Sir Ed Davey has welcomed the government's announcement for a series of local inquiries into the grooming gang scandal. The Home Secretary announced government-backed local reviews in 5 areas yesterday, stopping short of committing to a full-scale national inquiry. A lawyer representing victims told GBNews there may be hundreds of thousands of victims in every town and city across the country. And 2 missing sisters in Aberdeen made an earlier visit to the bridge where they were last seen hours before they disappeared, as seen on newly released CCTV footage. Police Scotland said a text message was also sent to the women's landlady on the morning that they vanished, indicating they wouldn't be returning back to the flat. Eliza and Henrietta Hutzi, both 32, were last spotted in the city's Market Street at Victoria Bridge around 2:10 on Tuesday morning on the 7th of January. The siblings, originally from Hungary, were seen crossing the bridge and turning right onto a footpath. Their disappearance has sparked a major search operation, and officers are now appealing for anyone who may have seen them at this earlier time to come forward. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. More from me in half an hour.
Thank you, Tatiana. Now, Labour's proposal for just 5 locally led rape gang inquiries has been blasted as a disgraceful whitewash by survivors and campaigners. And with 73% of all voters, including actually 75% of Labour voters in a GB News poll demanding now that full national inquiry, is this scandal now simply too big to ignore? Well, let's remind ourselves what the Home Secretary Yvette Cooper had to say yesterday.
Effective local inquiries can delve into far more local detail and deliver more locally relevant answers and change than a lengthy nationwide inquiry can provide. So Tom Crowther, KC, chair of the Telford inquiry, has agreed to work with the government to develop a new framework for victim-centred, locally led inquiries where they are needed, and as a first step, to work with Oldham Council and up to 4 other pilot areas.
Well, for more on this and the big political stories of the day, I'm delighted to say I'm joined in the studio by Christopher Hope, our political editor, and the Shadow Justice Secretary, Mr Robert Jenrick. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Chris, I'm sorry, I'm going to go with Robert first today, if that's OK. Thanks for coming to the studio.
It's my pleasure.
Much appreciated. Let's start on Yvette Cooper yesterday. Have to say, we spoke to survivors straight after that announcement. It happened during my show, and they were seething. They were utterly furious. 5 out of 50 towns, no legal teeth to compel people to actually turn up, no power to put them in jail, £5 million for 5 towns when the Telford inquiry cost £8 million alone. It was absolutely lambasted by survivors and by almost all of our viewers. What's your take on what was proposed yesterday?
Well, look, I think it's welcome that more is happening. Just a week ago, Keir Starmer was condemning those of us who are calling for more as people jumping on a far-right bandwagon. They've changed their tune, but this clearly isn't enough, is it? For all the reasons you've just set out, thanks to GB News, we know that these rape gangs are operating in at least 50 places across the country. And yet this is only going to take it up in 5. Local inquiries do not have the powers to get to the truth. You can't request witnesses to come. They're not giving evidence under oath. You can't ensure that the documents are coming forward. And we've already seen their limitations, because there was one in Greater Manchester where the 2 people who were leading it ultimately resigned because they said it didn't work. We need to have a full national inquiry. This is one of the biggest and worst scandals in modern British history. Not a single public official has ever been held to account for this. There is so much more we need to know. And I am certain that there are vulnerable young girls in towns and cities, the length and breadth of our country, who today are still being victims of this scandal. We've got to stop that. I
think you're absolutely right. I mean, we hear from them all the time. This is still going on as we speak. Do you think we've got to the point now where we just won't swallow this anymore? Perhaps even in the past, this would be, oh, great, there's going to be 5 inquiries, there's going to be an audit by Baroness Louise Casey, oh, tickety-boo. But we're at a point now, I think, people just know that these inquiries don't have any teeth. They demand more. Do you think that this 3-month audit could get us to the point where actually Baroness Casey says, well, actually, we do need that full inquiry? Will that give the Labour Party the political cover? I'm trying to be glass half full about this. Do you think we'll get to that point?
Well, I hope so. And I do have some confidence in Louise Casey. Louise was sent in by Eric Pickles, the then Secretary of State, to be the Commissioner in Rotherham. And she wrote an excoriating report about what she found in Rotherham. And she went in even after Professor Jay had done a report into that place, and she said nothing had changed. There was a culture of denial. There was cover-ups by the officials. So a lot now rests on Louise Casey's shoulders if Yvette Cooper and Keir Starmer are not willing to take action today. And I hope that Louise will recommend that we have the full national inquiry and get to the truth of what's really going on across the country.
Chris?
I thought Yvette Cooper kind of went there yesterday. She said there's 127 major police investigations across 29 different forces. That does suggest a national problem. Not everyone agrees, though, do they, Martin and Robert? David Greenwood, this sister representing 60 or so victims on my podcast today, Chopper's Political Podcast, he doesn't want a national inquiry. He thinks the money spent, which might be £200 million, typically on a judge-led inquiry, should go instead on implementing J. Get the J inquiry.
The J report didn't even mention grooming gangs. It mentioned Pakistanis once. It mentioned Muslims 3 times. The J report is widely acknowledged as a blunt tool that asks the wrong questions.
But what it recommended will stop the suffering now is his point. It's all very well going back over the past. Where do you stop going back over the past? The J recommendations, notably mandatory reporting, some kind of fund to pay out on the compensation for these damaged young women in their 20s who often present 10 years after the event. Deal with that first and then do a national inquiry.
But Chris, I think that you can do 2 things at once.
Yeah.
In no other scandal have I ever heard it said that you couldn't try and fix problems now whilst also delving into what's really happened. You know, when we had the terrible Grenfell tragedy, no one said, don't have a national inquiry. Or no one said, whilst there is a national inquiry, don't try and get dangerous cladding off buildings. You can obviously do 2 things at once. And important, though, is to implement the recommendations of Jay, like mandatory reporting. You know, it doesn't really require that, does it? What's happened here is that cowardly people in local councils or police officers or, frankly, politicians, some of whom are now members of Parliament, didn't act when they knew what was happening. And we've got to change that culture and understand what really motivated that.
I have to ask you the question that's been asked many times before. And it's great being wise after the event, but why didn't the Conservatives implement a full national inquiry during those 14 years in power?
Well, I think we probably should have done, shouldn't we? I think everyone in public life has to ask themselves, why didn't they do more? Now, we did do things. We created the 2 J reports. We sent Louise Casey into Rotherham to try and find out what was going on and to change it. We created the Grooming Gangs Task Force under Suella Braverman, which led to 550 people being arrested. I called last year for full life sentences for grooming gang perpetrators and for those who have foreign nationalities to be sent out of this country so they never step foot here again. But could we have done more? Yes. We do know more now today, thanks to people like Charlie Peters here on GB News. We know that this is happening almost everywhere in the country, at least 50 towns. And not just, you know, places in the north or the Midlands, but we know it's happening in High Wycombe and Aylesbury and all manner of places. And so the sheer scale and breadth of this was not known previously. It is known today. We've got to take action.
OK, thank you. I'd like to speak get you now on our next story. And yesterday, in fact, sat in that very chair where you are, I spoke with Margaret Mizzen, who was Jimmy Mizzen's mum, yesterday, who said that the BBC has still not apologised after they showed music of a drill rapper who murdered her son.
I think it's absolutely beyond disgraceful. I can't believe that the BBC would do this. Now, I know that at the moment they're saying, well, they didn't know who he was, etc. But there must be ways of looking at these things. You know, perhaps people show their passports with a name or something, but they're making excuses. There's no excuses. They played his music, and you're playing the music of someone who's committed murder.
Mr. Jenrick, I was so touched by her. She had such amazing powers of forgiveness. She said after everything that she's been through, and her boy was murdered when he was just 16, this bloke got less time in prison than her son had been alive. This creature, Jake Farley, got 15 years. He meant to get life. He was left out. He was rapping. He was promoted on the BBC. He was rapping using the murder of her son as material. He's been subsequently banged up back in jail today because guess what? The silly little boy was filmed in an area of the country he wasn't meant to be. What would you do? You're the Shadow Justice Secretary. People feel they're let out of jail too soon. They're allowed to profit off of death. This is completely and utterly wrong.
Yeah, well, firstly, I thought the poise and the dignity of Jimmy Mizzen's mum last night on GBNews was astonishing. Very few people would be able to react to a situation like this in the manner that she did. I think the BBC owe her an apology.
Yeah.
I am disgusted that they have not done so. I know that you have asked for their comment. They still haven't given one to GBNews. They've screwed up in an incredible way here. Imagine putting the music, promoting the music career of a murderer on the BBC. Songs that glamorise violence. This is an appalling error of judgment by the BBC. She deserves an apology, and there now needs to be a proper investigation as to how this could happen so that it never happens again. I also think the Ministry of Justice, frankly, should investigate how this murderer could brazenly be promoting himself with music glamorising violence, glamorising the very crime for which he was previously in prison, and yet nothing happened until the media found out about this. It became a national story. Now he's back in jail where he belongs, but something has gone very, very badly wrong in the Ministry of Justice, in the probation service, and we need to get to the bottom of that so we have answers.
Some of the lyrics in his words, his songs were literally saying, seeing blood spilled same floor he was left on. Jimmy Mizzen died on the floor of a bakery after he had his arteries and his neck severed by this creature. It's just an incredibly upsetting situation to be. Do you think there's a much bigger conversation about how he seems to be so soft on crime? People like this, he got a life sentence. Why was he let out?
Yeah, look, I agree. I believe that prison is there for a purpose. We need to ensure that people are locked up for longer. I have a campaign around career criminals, the people who are responsible for so many crimes today. And the public are rightly appalled when they see people who have committed the most serious crimes, like this disgusting individual getting out of prison early and then able, seemingly with impunity, to go and mock his victim, valorise his crime. And the Ministry of Justice, the authorities are doing nothing about it until it hits the front pages of newspapers.
OK, I've got a quick statement to read out here. You are correct to say the BBC has refused to comment on whether they would apologise to Jimmy's mother, Margaret, but they have said about Jake Farley. This individual does not feature on any BBC playlists. We have never played, as we pointed out to The Sun, the lyrics they have printed. He's had 2 other tracks played twice. One extra has no further plan to play his music. We were not aware of his background, and we in no way condone his actions. See, sorry is the hardest word to say. Just say sorry. Just say sorry to Margaret Mizzen. That's all we've got to do. She sat here yesterday and she said, I'd be happy if they just said sorry. Just find it in yourselves to do the right thing. Now, we've gone to the Attorney General for comments, but we've had no response as yet. But Lord Hermer has previously said this: I have seen how lawyers themselves become targets, including assassinations of many people known to the organisations I have worked with. This is about the other story, isn't it? Yeah, we're talking about this other story first. This is about the story this week. Jerry Adams potentially could be receiving a taxpayer-funded compensation scheme. Robert Jenrick, I know it's something that gets you very, very hot under the collar. Tell us your take.
Look, there are mounting questions now around the Attorney-General, Lord Hermer, who is one of the closest friends and associates of the Prime Minister, and we've had no answers. We now need transparency. And no question is more pressing than, did the Attorney-General recuse himself from whether or not the government should drop an appeal into a case that had been previously heard in the High Court? The Attorney-General was, until last year, Gerry Adams' lawyer, and then a few months ago, the government decided not to proceed with an appeal, the consequence of which is likely to be the government having to pay out millions of pounds to IRA terrorists and sympathisers, to people like Gerry Adams. We need to know what was the role of the Attorney-General. Did he recuse himself, or did he have a massive conflict of interest by getting involved in this case when he was previously the lawyer of Gerry Adams?
Chris.
Number 10 has tried to explain this today, Robert Jenrick. They say there's an established system to ensure that law officers are not consulted on cases which could give rise to conflict of interest. They say that there's an established process on declarations. Any decisions about the Legacy Act, which is what you're just talking about, were taken by the Northern Ireland office, and they point out that Lord Hermer did represent Gerry Adams as well as the family of a young dead British soldier. So they do represent different people all the time, and they can do two cases involving contrasting positions at the same time, they say.
I mean, this is an extraordinary situation. There's no precedent for this. Keir Starmer has appointed someone as Attorney-General who has built his career representing cases against the government of the United Kingdom. He represented Gerry Adams. He represented Shamima Begum. He's represented individuals in the Afghanistan inquiry, which is against members of our own special forces. He always seems to be on the side of those people who hate this country, who are fighting the British government. He now finds himself as our own Attorney-General, and time and again, there's going to be questions about conflicts of interest. How is he going to provide advice to the government, to the Prime Minister on these issues? Is he recusing himself? He's refusing to be clear about that, hiding behind conventions which were designed to protect ministers, never to protect the Attorney-General against accusations of conflicts of interest. It is hard to see how he can continue to do his job properly. He needs to be honest and transparent now, or else his position is going to be increasingly untenable.
OK, let's read that statement that I prematurely went to a moment ago. As I said, we've gone to the Attorney-General for a comment but have had no response. But Lord Hermer has previously said this: I have seen how lawyers themselves become targets, including assassinations of many people known to the organisations I've worked with and supported. I have seen in most bloody terms what happens when you undermine faith in integral parts of the rule of law system. And asked whether he had been paid by Mr Adams on a no-win, no-fee basis, he said, I'm afraid I can't recall. And even if I could recall, I'm not sure I would feel inclined to answer a question as to the basis on which I was paid by any given client. Well, there we go. That's as clear as mud. Let's quickly, while we have you here, Mr Jenrick, ask you about pensions. The Prime Minister, the leader of the opposition, Kemi Badenoch, was on a radio station yesterday when asked by a caller about the triple lock. She seemed to hint that it could be looked at. It could be taken away. Needless to say, pensioners aren't especially happy.
Look, we're fiscal conservatives. It's right that we look at means testing because, you know, the welfare state needs to be targeted on the people who need it most. So what Kemi was referring to was, are there places where we could means test properly, not the triple lock? And she's been very clear about that today.
Why talk about it at all? It's like
I think it's like dementia tax, fox hunting. If you look at what she actually said, she was talking about the principle of means testing and saying that there are places where we should be means testing because we want to look after taxpayers' money and spend it wisely. And there are examples where the Labour government is doing completely the opposite. Look at winter fuel allowance, for example, where they're not means testing properly. There are poor pensioners, people living on as little as £13,000
but the winter fuel
allowance,
see that
going. She was not saying that we should means test the triple lock. We created the triple lock. We implemented it, we defended it for 14 years, it was in our last manifesto.
The backlash on the winter fuel allowance has taught the entire nation one thing: don't mess with the silver pension vote. Why even talk about it? This is your voter base. It's like over 65 is the average age of
the
Conservative voters.
The triple lock is a Conservative policy. It's been an important policy that we have continued with for all our years in government. Kemi was not saying that was going to change. What she was saying was, rightly, we should be concerned about means testing so that in other parts of the welfare system, we're making sure the money is being spent wisely.
OK, Chris, anything further?
Well, are you worried about this, that we have to keep, your team keeps clearing up after what Kemi Badenoch says? Maternity pay in the party conference, that need to be looked at. They had to clarify it wasn't maternity pay. They're not going to cut new mums' pay when they have babies. And now we have this issue with the triple lock. Is there a problem here? I mean, Kemi Badenoch said she'd be honest about what she meant, but perhaps she needs some help explaining what she means. We waited until lunchtime today to get these clarifications on Twitter.
No, I think she was actually clear if you listen to the clip back. What she was referring to was the idea of means testing. I think any of us who believe in taxpayer value should be concerned about that. There will be places where we can think carefully about that, but one of them is not likely to be the triple lock.
Super. Robert Jenrick, an absolute delight to have you in the show. Thank you very, very much. Now, still to come on today's show, as we just talked about, the drill rapper who killed schoolboy Jimmy Mizzen has been recalled to prison after shamelessly boasting about crime. And I'll speak to the criminal lawyer, Nick Freeman, next. I've got to say to you, drill rapper, enjoy the porridge. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes. Thank you for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Thank you, Britain.
Thank you for watching.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks for subscribing.
Thank you for your support.
It's you that make us the People's Channel.
As we reflect on our journey so far, we're filled with immense gratitude.
You mean the world to us. We couldn't have reached this point without you.
As a very special thank you, we are giving you the chance to win one of 50 GB News thank you boxes. They're worth £50 each.
For full terms and conditions, and to enter, just go to gbnews.com/thank you.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Now, we're going to introduce you to Liam Wildish. Liam, well, I'd like to think he's a friend of mine because I follow him on Instagram, on TikTok there as well.
You're a big fan, aren't you?
Big fan, because there's what he does. He's a cleaner. He cleans signs. But the thing is, he's not employed by councils or whatever. He does this voluntarily. And you sort of think to yourself, well, who cleans these signs? Why have these signs been allowed to get into this terrible state of disrepair and filthiness?
So basically, long story short, about 6 years ago, I used to be a window cleaner. In the community where I lived, I noticed all of the road signs were filthy, and I was perfectly equipped to clean them. So basically, I cleaned the road signs as a bit of a thank you to the community and sort of make a little bit of awareness of my window cleaning business at the time. Yeah. Sort of cleans up the area, makes the road safer, and that's kind of how that started. And people found it like a really satisfying sort of approach. So that sort of led on to today of a video in cleaning the dirty road signs and making sort of satisfying content with it as well.
What is the equipment? What have we got here?
So this is a water-fed pole system connected to a backpack, which is what feeds the water through the end of the brush there. It's perfectly equipped to basically remove this green dirty, it's like a mildew build-up that you get on the signs. Yeah. As you can see, this is like extremely effective at removing so
GB News viewers, if they spot a particularly grisly sign in their area, then they can get in touch.
They can do, yeah.
And Liam Wildish, the sign guy, can sort you out.
If you find Liam the sign guy online, drop me a message, let me know, and I'll add you to my list of places.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 3:27 with me, Martin Daubney, on GB News. Now, after the mother of murdered Jimmy Mizzen appeared on my show on GB News yesterday, the drill rapper who murdered her son, Jimmy, has been sent back to jail. But the BBC, who promoted his sick music, has still not apologised. Now, let me read out some of his lyrics, but a warning that some of the following lines could be disturbing to some viewers. Sharpen up my blade, I've got to keep those necessary. Stay alert and kept it ready. Any corner could be deadly. Stuck it on a man and watched him melt like Ben and Jerry's. Well, disgusting stuff, making profit out of murder. And I'm joined now by criminal defence lawyer Nick Freeman. Nick, welcome to the show. Pleasure to have your company. So this disgusting individual is back in jail where he belongs. Do you think justice has been done?
Oh, well, in part. I mean, he shouldn't have been released in the first place, in my view, because clearly he's pulled the wool over the parole board's eyes. He's attended every programme that was available to him. Obviously, when you go to prison, he was 19, got a life sentence, and the purpose of prison is to punish and to help you rehabilitate. And he's attended all these programmes, clearly portrayed himself as somebody who he actually is very different from, because the lyrics of the songs that you've just read out indicate that he's not only boastful about the horrendous crime that he's committed, but he's actually obsessed with death. It's still very much present on his mind. And in my view, from those lyrics, he poses he presents an insatiable appetite to want to kill and poses a huge threat to society. And one wonders on that basis how he was ever released. So in answer to your question, has justice been done? Belatedly, yes, but he shouldn't have actually been released in the first place. And I'm not sure what sort of psychological assessment he underwent before he persuaded the parole board that he was actually a person who had learnt from his errors and was actually a new person. He's now 35. He's been out for about 18 months. I think that there are all sorts of issues here, and one of them must be, what do we do with mass rappers? Because I'm sure that this will not be the first time that this has happened. And don't we doesn't the media owe a responsibility to all its viewers and listeners and watchers to make sure that whoever we're portraying, we need to know who they are. And maybe this has taught us that we actually need to ensure that we know who is singing, who is acting, whatever they're doing. So maybe there will be movements to prevent this happening in the future. And that's one good thing that's come out of it. And of course, now he's got a huge problem. He's got a life sentence. He's been recalled for breach of his conditions. He's going to have a huge problem now persuading the parole board that he is a changed man, because I doubt very much anyone's going to believe a word of what he says.
I think you're exactly right to talk about the duty of care of any artist. If only the BBC had done that, they might not have caused such emotional trauma to Jimmy's poor mother, who I had on the show yesterday. She was recoiling when she was having to see pictures of the murderer of her boy sat on a supercar. But luckily, he's also blessed with unbridled stupidity because he went back to an area of London where he wasn't meant to be as a breach of his bail conditions. As you said, he's been glorifying the murder of Jimmy Mizzen in his lyrics. No remorse. What does happen next legally? I mean, how long could this guy end up staying in Clink for?
He could stay there for the rest of his life. I don't think he will. But when you're released on licence, he's not actually on bail. He's on licence. And what that means is he's serving his prison sentence in the community. He's now breached those conditions. He's back in prison, continuing to serve his life sentence. And now, I mean, the parole board will be notified within 28 days. And he will now, I anticipate, serve many, many more years because, as I say, he's pulled the wool over their eyes once. And it's quite clear he does pose a huge threat. He has a cavalier disregard to compliance of his conditions, but the lyrics of these songs indicate what's prevalent in his mind, and it's not something that we really want in our society. So, the duty is to ensure that we're safe, and he will only be released now, as he should have been in the first place, when the parole board is 100% satisfied that he is a different man from the man we know he is at the moment.
So, Nick Freeman, may I ask you, if you were representing, say, Margaret Mizzen in this case, and you were acting against this individual, what would your demand be in terms of how long he should serve in prison from this point onwards, Mr. Fari?
Well, I would want to make sure that before there will be a thorough psychological assessment by at least 2 psychiatrists, psychologists as well, to make sure that he's changed. The programmes, clearly, he attends them, as many people do. And sometimes they do good, and sometimes people come out of prison, there's a punitive and rehabilitative effect, a remedial effect, and it works. But in this case, it clearly hasn't. And, the programmes are just, for him, a licence to pull the wool over everyone's eyes. So to answer your question, the parole board will want to make sure, they're not going to want to make sure that make this mistake again. So I think that probably the better question would be, how as a defence lawyer would you persuade a parole board that he is now eligible to be released? Because I think now he's going to spend many, many more years before he is released. When he is released, if he is, the licence conditions will be so stringent, he'll hardly be able to breathe.
Well, maybe he can make some rap music to the sound of the world's smallest violin while he's back inside. Nick Freeman, thank you very, very much for joining us on GB News today. Now, Probation Service spokesperson has issued the following statements. Our thoughts with Jimmy Mizen's family, who deserve better than to see their son's murder shamelessly boasting about his violent crime. All offenders released on licence are subject to strict conditions. As this case shows, we will recall them to prison if they break the rules. And indeed, justice has been served. Lots more still to come between now and 4 o'clock, including hundreds of tractors are parked outside British supermarkets today in a show of force called The Final Straw. Will our shops support British farmers? We asked them, and we'll tell you their responses soon. But first, here's your headlines, and it's Tatiana Sanchez.
Martin, thank you very much. The top stories. A Nazi-obsessed man who tried to stab an asylum seeker to death has been jailed today. Callum Parslow was handed a life sentence and will serve a minimum of 22 years and 8 months in prison after he attacked a man at a hotel in Worcestershire in April last year as a protest against small boat crossings. The 32-year-old has Hitler's signature tattooed on his arm, and he used a knife worth more than £700 he'd purchased online to attack Mr. Nahom Hagos. The victim, who was stabbed in the chest and hand, said it was a miracle that he'd survived. In other news, the Israeli Security Cabinet has recommended approving the Gaza ceasefire and hostage return deal, which will go to a wider government vote to be finalised. Terror group Hamas is expected to release the first hostages under a Gaza ceasefire deal on Sunday, according to the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. More than 46,000 Palestinians have been killed in the conflict, which started in October 2023, when Hamas-led militants killed almost 1,500 Israelis. Elsewhere, the man who served 14 years in jail for the murder of schoolboy Jimmy Mizen has been recalled to prison for breaching his licence conditions. Jake Fahry killed Jimmy and in 2008 was sentenced to 14 years behind bars. The 35-year-old was released on licence in June 2023 following his 14-year term, but recalled yesterday morning. Part of the rapper's parole agreement includes being barred from entering the Greenwich Borough of London, but in music videos found by the Sun newspaper and also watched by his victim's family, Fahry, who goes by the alias 10, was filmed in front of Canary Wharf inside that area. Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy says the BBC should reflect on the decision to showcase the drill rapper, who was promoted on their One Extra radio station. And the FTSE 100's hit a new record high as traders bet on a cut to interest rates. Buoyed on by lowering inflation and declining retail sales, the FTSE 100 jumped to 8,492.06. Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, has insisted she is here for the long haul in a fight back following criticism of her response to financial market turbulence. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Crash Law 24 sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2219 and 1.1838 euros. The price of gold is 2,220 pence per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 8,524 points.
Crash Law 24 sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
Hello again. Here's your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. Now, as we look ahead to the weekend, it is going to stay mostly dry, but towards the southeast in particular, it's going to remain pretty cold and pretty cloudy. We do have high pressure still dominating the picture across the UK, and this will remain for a little while yet, but there are some fronts trying to come in from the west. These will mainly be affecting northwestern parts. So here towards the northwest, a bit of blustery winds at times, some rain coming through, though actually overnight it's looking like it will be largely dry. Some clear skies across northern Scotland, allowing temperatures to drop. Elsewhere, a lot of cloud, perhaps some drizzly rain in a few places. And even with that blanket of cloud, temperatures actually taking a bit of a drop for quite a few places. Many areas falling close to, if not a bit below freezing. So a chilly start for many of us tomorrow morning, but quite a cloudy one. Even in the south, it is going to be quite cloudy. Could be a bit murky for some, perhaps some brighter breaks towards the north of Devon and Cornwall, and also some brighter breaks towards the north of Wales and across some parts of northern England. But on the whole, it is going to be a cloudy start. The greatest chance of any sunshine earlier on will be across northern parts of Scotland. Where the cloud is thick enough, there will be a few spots of drizzly rain around, and because temperatures are so low, particularly over higher ground, we could even see some snow grains developing at times, but these shouldn't cause any major problems. Otherwise, as we go through tomorrow, we're going to see a greater amount of sunshine compared to today, particularly across northern parts of England, around Wales, southwest England as well. Good chance of seeing some blue skies, but there will still be a bit of a north-south split when it comes to our temperatures, staying cold towards the south, further north and nearer normal or a little bit above average for the time of year. Little change as we go through the evening, staying cloudy for quite a few places, especially towards the southeast, but some clearer skies allowing temperatures to drop as we go into Sunday. Then the generally dry weather continues as we go into the beginning of next week, but it is going to be pretty cloudy. Bye-bye.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Alan Wright. In Worcestershire, the M5 northbound is partly blocked after a collision. It's between Junction 5 for Droitwich and Junction 4A for the M42. In Manchester, the M61 northbound is partly blocked after a breakdown. That's between Horwich at Junction 6 and the Chorley turn-off at Junction 8. In West Yorkshire, there are roadworks blocking a lane both ways on the M1. That's between Garforth at Junction 47 and the M61 turn-off at Junction 43. In Hampshire, the M27, you've got two lanes shut both ways for roadworks, and they're between Junction 5 for Southampton Airport and Junction 8 for Hamble and the A30-24.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Time is 3:40. It's me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, hundreds of tractors are parked up outside British supermarkets today in a show of force called The Final Straw. Now, we can now talk to the farmer Charles Goadby, who'll be heading to protest outside his local Tesco's this afternoon. Charles, there you are. The tractor is behind you, no doubt getting all revved up, all warmed up to go to your local supermarket. Tell us, what are these protests about? What do you hope to achieve?
Well, like it says, it is the final straw. So we've heard about the protests going on about the government and the inheritance tax. This is focusing now on the supermarkets and the fairness in the supply chain, because quite frankly, farmers aren't getting paid fairly for the produce that we are doing and what we're supplying to the public. So all we're just saying is, let's just have a little bit of fairness.
And I've seen videos of supermarket car parks packed full of tractors all over the country. I've been sent them in. And as I understand it, there's been a very warm welcome from staff on the ground. This is not a protest. You're not trying to blockade. You're chatting to customers. It's very friendly. You're even not careful you don't get a parking ticket in case you stay more than 2 hours. So for now, it's all very convivial. It's all very civilised. But Morrison's came out and supported the farmers last week. I believe Asda have come out and supported you today. We've contacted every of the big supermarkets, and I'm afraid none of the others have got back, including Tesco. Does that mean, in that point, they're on the naughty step and they could be the subjects for further protests?
Well, it's certainly not going to go in their favour, is it? I mean, we've got to look. Tesco's, look at the profits they're making and the returns on their investment. They're making a 6% return. Compared to the farmers that are supplying them, we're making a 0.5% return. So that's why farming and food production in the UK isn't sustainable. And that's why we're calling on all the supermarkets, but particularly Tesco's. It's about time that they supported their suppliers. It's about time they supported and backed British farming. And it's about time they actually backed the British public and the population who want British produce, who want the best produce in the world. So let's make it sustainable and fair for everybody.
Yeah, we've got some footage on our screen there. This is at the Tesco in Leicester. And the signs on the tractors today, I note, are not political. They are about supporting farmers. There's no governmental message. This is politically neutral. That's quite clear. Impressive sights of these tractors rolling into car parks there. Just to repeat that Morrison's have been vocal in their support, backing farmers against budget changes. We've reached out today to Sainsbury's, to Tesco's, to Marks and Spencer's, to Waitrose, to Lidl, to Aldi, to Booths and Asda for their position. And only Asda has come back to us today, and they got this statement. I'd like to read it out now. They've said, "We've been raising our concerns with government and will be supporting the NFU's campaign, calling for a pause in the implementation of agriculture property relief to allow for proper compensation." So that, Charles Goby, shows that Asda and Morrison's are firmly on your side. What's your message to the rest of the supermarkets listening in?
Well, it does show that they're on our side in our fight with the government on the inheritance tax, but nowhere in that statement did it say that we're going to pay our producers, our farmers fairly. And that is the message we've got to get out to all the supermarkets, not just Sainsbury's, not just Tesco's and Aldi, Morrison's and Asda as well. We need fairness in the supply chain because, quite frankly, if it isn't fair trade, it's unfair trade. And that's what we're seeing at the minute. We can buy fair trade coffee. We can buy fair trade sugar. Why can we not buy fair trade milk? Why can we not buy fair trade vegetables or fair trade meat? So let's get some fairness and let's get some honesty in pricing in structure as well.
Don't you think, though, Charles Goby, supermarkets are renowned for being one of the only businesses on the planet that dictate a price? You don't get a chance to even negotiate a price. Is this second battle with the supermarkets themselves going to be just as difficult, potentially, as the battle with the government over inheritance tax? They're not going to give any blood from their stone willingly, are they?
No, I know this is going to be the battle. And the problem is how we've got into this system that supermarkets, they rely on low margins, high volume. So they're just fighting each other for that volume. They want footfall and they're not really worried about how they get it. So how to keep that footfall is to keep reducing prices. And it's the farmers that are getting hit the hardest. We're the ones having to bear the cost of all that at the time when production costs are just rocketing. And meanwhile, we've got government that don't really care. They don't care. You've seen what they've done to farming with the inheritance tax reforms, but all they're interested in is seeing the price of food stay right down at rock bottom. Because when people have got hungry bellies, that's when they start to rebel. And they're using farmers to subsidise the welfare state. We're the ones that are keeping the price of food artificially low by taking the hit.
OK, well, good luck today as you roll your magnificent tractor there into the Tesco's car park and keep us abreast of developments. Best of British to you and the farmers and your family. Thank you very much for joining us today,
Cheers,
Charles Goby, and very good luck to you. Thank you. Now, coming up next, can you believe this? Palestinian protesters are actually returning to London tomorrow, following that announcement of a ceasefire deal earlier this week. I thought the war was over. Who's going to tell this mob? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, weekdays from 9 p.m.
5 years ago today, Harry and Meghan shocked the world when they announced that they were stepping back from royal life in what has since been dubbed Megxit. Many royal experts thought the future of the royal family was in doubt after the Duke and Duchess of Sussex's bombshell Oprah Winfrey interview, their scornful Netflix documentary and Harry's autobiography Spare that took aim at William and Catherine. Pleased to be joined now by entertainment and royal journalist Sarah Louise Robertson. Sarah, thank you very, very much. Great to have you on the show. So, Megxit, 5 years on, how's it gone for them?
It couldn't have gone any worse. I remember, as you pointed out there, Patrick, 5 years ago, one senior courtier called this move a declaration of war on the royal family. Well, this is a war that Meghan Markle and Prince Harry have lost. They are the losers in this whole sordid affair. And the royal family have come out stronger, more unified and better than ever. You know, she had it all in her hands to play with. It was all there to play with. She had the HRH title. She could have gone on to do wonderful things. And what's she now? A reality star. She's not even a working actress anymore. This new cookery show, Netflix have put it in the reality side of their categories. What a come down that is. We don't see them together in public anymore. She's doing her thing. She's going down the avenue of reality TV. And Harry's trying, I think, to do some of his charity work.
I still think that if he held his hands up and some things happened, that maybe the British public would.
He'd have to beg his brother. He'd have to beg his brother. The sticking point here is Prince William. Charles, yes, misses his son. I will say that again. He does.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point.
He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. The time is 3:49 with me, Martin Daubney, on GB News. Now, can you believe this? Palestinian protesters return to London tomorrow following the announcement of a ceasefire. I thought they wanted a ceasefire. What have they got left to protest about? Well, the wall meant to ask, and I'm delighted to say I'm joined in the studio by Niak Gulbani, an Iranian anti-terror activist. It's been way too long. Welcome back to the studio. Simple question. I thought the war was over. They said they wanted a ceasefire. What on earth are they protesting about tomorrow? They're at the BBC at midday, and it looks like there's going to be a big turnout. What are they protesting against?
Actually, they changed their right now their mind, and they want to protest against arming Israel. Okay, right now they are happy and they want to celebrate. They saying we want to celebrate because of the the ceasefire, but we should understand who is happy right now. We're seeing the footage that's coming out from the Gaza. The terrorists actually come in the street and chanting, we are all Muhammad Dif, which is, it's really top great terrorists in Gaza. And they want to just, they want to just Israel surrounded front of terrorists. That's exactly that they want. That's exactly what they chant here in UK. And especially we have the problem right now. The police actually realize, okay, when we want to, make any condition against them, what's going to be happen? They don't accept that, Okay, after ceasefire in Israel, what's going to be happening here in UK? They want to come in the street and, chanting for Venezuela. They want to come in. They didn't even one protest against grooming gang.
Well,
never.
Exactly. There were no protests by any of these people against grooming gangs. They're meant to be from the left. The left used to care about child protection. The left used to care about the industrial towns of Britain. They don't care anything for that. And the protest tomorrow, the BBC, I understand, it's opposite, very close to a synagogue. This is grotesque. Why is it being allowed to go ahead?
Actually, I don't understand them. Okay, when they are feeling unsafe, the Jewish community, when they feeling they are unsafe, that's happened in JW3. You see the footage that was on Friday, and you see the old woman cry. You know, the mob actually trying to harassing them violently. You know, but they want to try again on Saturday, tomorrow. Okay, if the police make a condition on you, or put a condition on you, why you try to come through and show your violence? If PSC get the responsibility from their reaction, okay, go ahead.
Okay, look.
They never get a responsibility about any violence from the protesters.
We've only got 1 minute left. I need to quickly ask you, Donald Trump's coming into power. A lot of people are saying that Iran, your home country, you'd like to see it purged of the Ayatollahs, of poisonous Islamism. Are you hopeful that Donald Trump might put a new peace in order in the Middle East and your country might get its dignity and heart back?
We are always, Iranian people inside Iran, they saying, we will done Islamic Republic with our hope, Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi. We are doing that. We just asking you, don't more deal with the Islamic Republic. You know, if the ceasefire happen and Islamic Republic still in power, what's going to be happen? Again, October 7th, because you see, the leader of the Hamas said, we will make again October 7 in Israel. We are Iranian people hope, and we want to get our country back with our Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi.
Okay, we have to leave it there. It's a pleasure to see you. Thank you very much for joining me in the studio. And that's Niak Gabani, arrested twice for his fearless protesting during all of the past year. 3 times. There we go. Next up, Labour's proposal for just 5 locally led rape-gang inquiries have been blasted as a disgraceful whitewash. I'll have that next here on the show with me, Martin Daubney, on GB News. But now it's time for your weather.
Despite the morning rain, it'll be a nice, warm, cosy day ahead. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again. Here's your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. Now, as we look ahead to the weekend, it is going to stay mostly dry, but towards the southeast in particular, it's going to remain pretty cold and pretty cloudy. We do have high pressure still dominating the picture across the UK, and this will remain for a little while yet, but there are some fronts trying to come in from the west. These will mainly be affecting northwestern parts. So here towards the northwest, a bit of blustery winds at times, some rain coming through, though actually overnight it's looking like it will be largely dry. Some clear skies across northern Scotland, allowing temperatures to drop. Elsewhere, a lot of cloud, perhaps some drizzly rain in a few places. And even with that blanket of cloud, temperatures actually taking a bit of a drop for quite a few places. Many areas falling close to, if not a bit below freezing. So a chilly start for many of us tomorrow morning, but quite a cloudy one. Even in the south, it is going to be quite cloudy. Could be a bit murky for some, perhaps some brighter breaks towards the north of Devon and Cornwall, and also some brighter breaks towards the north of Wales and across some parts of northern England. But on the whole, it is going to be a cloudy start. The greatest chance of any sunshine earlier on will be across northern parts of Scotland. Where the cloud is thick enough, there will be a few spots of drizzly rain around, and because temperatures are so low, particularly over higher ground, we could even see some snow grains developing at times, but these shouldn't cause any major problems. Otherwise, as we go through tomorrow, we're going to see a greater amount of sunshine compared to today, particularly across northern parts of England, around Wales, southwest England as well. Good chance of seeing some blue skies, but there will still be a bit of a north-south split when it comes to our temperatures, staying cold towards the south, further north and nearer normal or a little bit above average for the time of year. Little change as we go through the evening, staying cloudy for quite a few places, especially towards the southeast, but some clearer skies allowing temperatures to drop as we go into Sunday. Then the generally dry weather continues as we go into the beginning of next week, but it is going to be pretty cloudy. Bye-bye.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Alan Wright. In Nottinghamshire, the A1, the Great North Road, that's partly blocked northbound after a collision between the A46 at the Newark Showground and the Vicarage Lane turn-off at North Muscombe. In Worcestershire, the M5 northbound is queuing after a collision involving a lorry between junction 5 at Droitwich and junction 4A for the M42. In Cambridgeshire, the A14 eastbound is partly blocked for repairs. They're between junction 22 for the A1 and 23 for Godmanchester. And in Buckinghamshire, the M1 northbound is partly blocked after a collision. That's happened between junction 14 for Milton Keynes and 15 for Northampton and the A45.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Don't miss your chance to win our biggest cash prize ever. An incredible £50,000. That's tax-free cash to spend on anything you like this year. What would you spend it on? £50,000 could buy those treats you've always dreamed of having. And just one entry into the Great British Giveaway really could make £50,000 cash all yours. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
A very, very good afternoon to you and a happy Friday. It's 4 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting for you live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, Labour's proposal for just 5 locally led rape gang inquiries has been blasted as a disgraceful whitewash by survivors and campaigners. And with 73% of all voters demanding a full national inquiry, is this scandal now simply too big to ignore? In a short while, I'll speak to a Welsh politician who was told that he was inflaming tensions when he raised concerns. Astonishing. That's coming next. And after the mother of murdered Jimmy Mizzen appeared on GB News on my show yesterday, the drill rapper who murdered her son Jimmy has now been sent back to jail. And good riddance to him. But the BBC promoted his sick music has still not apologised. What on earth are the BBC playing at? And last night, Kemi Badenoch appeared to suggest that the Tories might remove the pensions triple lock and means test it. Well, she's blasted that as fake news, but I'll be joined next by a furious pensioners campaigner who slams this as a betrayal of those who've paid in for their entire lives. Well, the show, always a pleasure to have your company. So around about 24 hours ago, when Yvette Cooper addressed the House of Commons, we were literally astonished at how half-hearted the rape gang inquiries that they were offering seemed. Just 5 towns, just £5 million. No powers to demand people turned up to give evidence. No real powers to put people in jail. It was slammed as a whitewash by survivors groups and Maggie Oliver. But There's been a surprise breakthrough in this past hour. Another member of Parliament throwing his weight behind a full national inquiry. We'll tell you who that is next. Get in touch, gbnews.com/your say. And now it's your headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Martin, thank you very much. The top stories this hour. The Israeli Security Cabinet has recommended approving the Gaza ceasefire and hostage return deal, which will go to a wider government vote to be finalised. Terror group Hamas is expected to release the first hostages under a Gaza ceasefire deal on Sunday, according to Benjamin Netanyahu. More than 46,000 Palestinians have been killed in the conflict, which started in October 2023, when Hamas-led militants killed almost 1,500 Israelis. In other news, the man who served 14 years in jail for the murder of schoolboy Jimmy Mizzen has been recalled to prison for breaching his licence conditions. Jake Fahry killed Jimmy and in 2008 was sentenced to 14 years behind bars. The 35-year-old was released on licence in June almost 2 years ago following his 14-year term, but was recalled yesterday morning. Part of the rapper's parole agreement includes being barred from entering the Greenwich Borough of London. But in music videos found by the Sun newspaper and also watched by his victim's family, Fahry, who goes by the alias 10, was filmed in front of Canary Wharf inside the area. Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy says the BBC should reflect on the decision to showcase the drill rapper who was promoted on their 1Extra radio station. GB News spoke to Jimmy's mother.
I think it's absolutely beyond disgraceful. I can't believe that the BBC would do this. Now, I know that at the moment they're saying, well, they didn't know who he was, etc. But there must be ways of looking at these things. You know, perhaps people show their passports with a name or something, but they're making excuses. There's no excuses. They played his music, and you're playing the music of someone who's committed murder.
Elsewhere, a Nazi-obsessed man who tried to stab an asylum seeker to death has been jailed. Callum Parslet was handed a life sentence and will serve a minimum of 22 years and 8 months in prison after he attacked a man at a hotel in Worcestershire in April last year as a protest against small boat crossings. The 32-year-old has Hitler's signature tattooed on his arm and used a knife worth over £700 he'd purchased online to attack Nahum Hagos. The victim, who was stabbed in the chest and hand, said it was a miracle that he'd survived. In other news, the Prime Minister says the defence and security deal with Poland will bring closer collaboration between the UK and its eastern ally. Sir Keir Starmer continues his visit to Europe, promising to take Britain's partnership with Poland to the next level. Meeting with his Polish counterpart Donald Tusk, the pair are expected to discuss how the countries can combat people smuggling gangs and Russian aggression. Yesterday, Sir Keir Starmer signed a 100-year deal with Ukraine while visiting the war-torn country. Now, farmers are descending on Britain's supermarkets today, raising awareness for Labour's plan to introduce inheritance tax. Tractors have been lining car parks, with farmers buying food and speaking with customers. The Chancellor announced the decision to tax farmers on assets worth £1 million in the budget in October. Farmers have been protesting ever since. Earlier today, GB News spoke to farmer Nigel Clark.
I feel sorry for anybody who's 70 or 80 and who's has planned for the future, but now all of a sudden the rug's pulled from under their feet. And also, it is going to catch, what is it, about 75% of farmers, because most farms, particularly in this area, will be worth well over £3 million.
Sir Ed Davey has welcomed the government's announcement for a series of local inquiries into the grooming gang scandal. The Home Secretary announced government-backed local reviews in 5 areas yesterday, stopping short of committing to a full-scale national inquiry. A lawyer representing victims told GB News there may be hundreds of thousands of victims in every town and city across the country. The Liberal Democrat leader said action is needed more quickly.
If we're going to be tough, yeah, let's have the inquiry. Just as you say, you're quite right about that. But I don't think we should let the government get away with not taking the action now. We need to take the action now. And I think that's what Liberal Democrats would urge the government and all opposition parties. And I'm sure you would agree, we do need action now.
Elsewhere, 2 missing sisters in Aberdeen made an earlier visit to the bridge where they were last seen hours before they disappeared, as seen on newly CCTV footage. Police Scotland said a text message was also sent to the women's landlady on the morning that they vanished, indicating they wouldn't be returning to the flat. Eliza and Henrietta Hutsey, both 32, were last spotted in the city's Market Street of Victoria Bridge around 2:10 on Tuesday morning on the 7th of January. The siblings, originally from Hungary, were seen crossing the bridge and turning right onto a footpath. Their disappearance has sparked a major search operation. And consumer watchdog Which has announced the best and worst energy firms as chosen by customers in its annual survey. Octopus Energy, Utility Warehouse and 100 Green coming out on top. All 3 took the top positions out of 16 providers, whereas British Gas and Scottish Power failed to impress, scored the lowest of the 16 providers voted for by 12,000 people. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. I'll be back in half an hour.
Thank you, Tatiana. Now we've got some breaking news for you here, and it's the Blackburn's MP has backed calls for a public inquiry into the grooming gangs of vulnerable young women girls, saying that the issue continues to haunt the town. And this is the independent MP, Adnan Hussain, who said, like so many of my constituents, I am horrified by the abuse and sexual exploitation of predominantly white working-class girls in mostly northern towns at the hands of grooming gangs. I therefore believe that should the victims and survivors of these crimes feel the need for a further public inquiry, and it's in the public interest, including the strong views expressed by my constituents, then it points to this being the correct route for the government to take. Well, it's surprise and very welcome news. And let's discuss this now with our national reporter, Charlie Peters. Charlie, yesterday the report, we covered this live on the show when the Labour Party came out to give us this 5-town report, locally controlled, no real legal teeth. It was slammed as a whitewash. A very surprising addition, perhaps, in Adnan Hussain, but I've got to say, most welcome. Tell us more.
Well, Martin, he refers specifically to correspondence with his constituents after voting against that inquiry a week prior. So clearly significant responses in Blackburn to what happened in the parliamentary vote. But he also takes aim at the Tories for introducing this amendment as a wrecking amendment, getting in the way of the Labour government's social care bill for children, the children's wellbeing proposals. But yeah, Adnan Hussain there, that Blackburn MP, specifically referring to abuse of predominantly white working-class girls by gangs in Lancashire and Blackburn in particular. So clearly, like many of the MPs who've intervened on this issue, responding to significant pressure from the local population. And as you say, Martin, potentially a surprising inclusion due to the nature of this MP's politics. But we have seen several Labour MPs now intervene, most notoriously and most sort of influentially, Sarah Champion, the MP for Rotherham, who yesterday was delivering from very stern criticism of these proposals, asking critical questions of Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, such as whether these new inquiries would have statutory powers and would they be on a statutory footing? That is, will they be able to compel witnesses to give evidence as inquiries are allowed to under the 2005 Act. However, it seems that while Yvette Cooper said there's going to be a accountability framework, that actual power won't be there, and so many survivors have expressed concerns about that. But yes, it just adds now to the chorus of parliamentarians across all parties, of blue, red and indeed none, coming together to call for this national inquiry into the grooming gang scandal.
And Charlie, it's especially of note what Adnan Hussain is doing here. He's a parliamentarian that perhaps we won't agree with him on very many things. He got in at the general election last time on a pro-Gaza ticket. But he did say last weekend on social media, because I invited him on the show last week, I'd love him to come on the show. He said this: British Pakistanis are not responsible for the crimes of rapists and paedophiles just because they happen to be of the same ethnicity as these criminals. Hear, hear. We all agree with that. And he said the demonising of a whole minority group by some politicians and media is deeply troubling and, in fact, highly dangerous. And I said to him, Mr. Hussain, thank you for speaking out as a moderate Muslim and condemning those on the fringes. And just, again, a further note, Charlie Peters, Blackburn has the 4th highest percentile of Muslim voters in any seat in the United Kingdom. 46%. This is the government's own data. 46% Muslim. Yet he wants an inquiry, presumably because he wants to say this isn't all Muslims, which of course it isn't. So actually, Charlie Peters, I think this is especially noteworthy, especially commendable, and I would love to get Adnan Hussain on the show. What he's doing here, Charlie, is very, very positive.
Yeah, and it comes after the government yesterday, as part of this intervention, said that they want more information on ethnicity data. They want more information on the religious or cultural drivers behind this form of child abuse. And perhaps that might be developed now as part of this rapid 3-month audit led by Baroness Louise Casey. Information that could lead to more people being confident to speak out with more facts under their belt. Because as it stands at the moment, Martin, there isn't so much information because so many police forces and local authorities have neglected to adequately collect data and information on this most appalling form of child abuse.
OK, well, stick around, Charlie, because I've got another guest to bring in now. I know you'd like to speak to him, and that's the leader of the Welsh Conservatives, Darren Millar, member of the Welsh Senate. Darren, welcome to the show. I'm delighted to have you on, and we've got you on not only because you've got a lot to say about this, but because of an incredible incident that happened to you, I believe, yesterday when you raised the issue of grooming gangs in the Senate earlier this week. Let's take a quick look at that video, and then we'll get your response.
One victim has even said that she was strangled, she was threatened with a knife, and her home was threatened with being burnt down. She was then raped, I'm afraid to say, First Minister, 1,000 times. She didn't know the number of perpetrators because there were so many.
I do need you to come to your question now. You are being overly descriptive and I think verging on not being totally respectful of the victim at this point. So can you tone down the rhetoric slightly?
I'm afraid I'm simply reading facts.
No, you're not.
No,
you're not. The use of language in this place needs to be making sure that you are keeping well away from inflaming any kind of discrimination or inciting of any kind of discrimination. You were doing very well, Darren Millar, with your first 2 questions in avoiding that. In your third one, you've become overly descriptive, and I need you to now reflect on that and just ask the question again, please.
I am not seeking to inflame anything.
Good. I'm glad you confirmed that. I'm glad you confirmed that.
Well, first of all, Darren Millar, well done for keeping your calm. And secondly, isn't it always the same? They're trying to shoot the messenger and ignore the message. You didn't say anything that was factually incorrect, and yet you became the bogeyman.
Well, it was pretty astonishing, and the public have made it clear that they were not impressed with that interjection. Of course, what I was trying to do was to shine a necessary light on the problems that we've got here in Wales. You know, unfortunately, the Professor J inquiry did find evidence of grooming gangs operating in the Swansea area. And we know from Charlie Peters' excellent documentary that there was another victim who spoke out about her personal experiences. And those were the ones that I was describing in the chamber that day. And, you know, that victim has been in touch with me to say how disappointed she was with the way in which I was interrupted from sharing her experiences. Because, look, we've got to put party politics aside on this. And that's why I'm so pleased to hear news about other MPs now joining with the number of others who've already spoken out, you know, against their party lines sometimes, to be able to call for this inquiry. We need to know here in Wales that there's not another Rotherham or a Rochdale happening on our our doorstep. The only place that the J inquiry looked at was Swansea, and it found some evidence. We know that places elsewhere have also seen problems. Crime Stoppers has had a national campaign here in Wales because young people as young as 11 and 14 have been offered vaping products in return for sexual favours, not just by one individual, but by a number of individuals in flats upstairs of their local shops. So we've got to get to the bottom of this situation. That's why we have said if there's no national inquiry, and I don't know why the UK government is so resistant to having one of those, but if there's no national inquiry across the UK, then we need a Wales-wide inquiry here.
And Charlie Peters, this would come as no surprise to you that as this story rolls on and on and on, more towns are coming to light where this is happening. And yet the attitude of the Welsh Parliament, the Senate here, is simply to, well, be quiet. You're inflaming things.
Yes, well, Martin, South Wales has been on my radar for this issue for several years now, and I was glad to hear reference to our work being raised in the Welsh Parliament, in particular promoting that voice of that survivor Emily, a very brave lady who has spoken out about experiences of being trafficked from Wales to other towns in England as well over the border for further abuse, trafficked and abused by several gangs. But Dan, I'd just like to ask you, when you had that experience in the Senedd, was your thought that that sort of response from the presiding officer could have silenced other survivors from speaking out, that it could have made them more nervous to stand up because their cases could be described as inflammatory?
Well, look, I am determined to make sure that the things which have happened when people have blown the whistle on these issues in other parts of the UK and they've been told to be quiet because of community tensions, etc. I'm determined to make sure that those things don't happen here in Wales, and that's why I'm calling off people, from across the party spectrum to support Emily and other survivors in their campaign for a Wales-wide or UK national inquiry. We've got to get to the bottom of these things. There has been insufficient investigation so far. We know that the Welsh Government has simply accepted the assurances of people like the South Wales Police and local authorities in Wales to date. And yet we know from the J report itself that those assurances weren't worth a bean when she went in and she further investigated and found victims. Many of those victims had been victim shamed. So these things are not acceptable. We need to understand the extent of the problems in Wales so that we can get to grips with them. Following that exchange in the chamber, the First Minister told me that she was disappointed with the fact that I had raised questions about this matter, which again I was pretty unimpressed with, and then sought to give me assurances that these things were under control, if you like, because things were being implemented from the J report, and because we had a law which required people to blow the whistle when they saw people who were victims of abuse and exploitation. That law has failed to protect other people already. It's been in place since 2014, and yet we know there have been other victims since then. So we've got to get our act together. We need an inquiry here in Wales, and that's what I'm fighting for alongside these very, very brave victims who've been prepared to stick their neck out and speak out.
Well, Darren Miller, I just find it astonishing that the response of the First Minister and of the Senedd is to simply bury their heads in the sand and try and silence you, and trying to, and in the instance of doing that, that obviously deters survivors from coming forward. But well done for speaking out, and please continue to do so. Darren Miller there, the leader of the Welsh Conservatives in the Senedd, and of course, always fantastic reporting. Charlie Peters, the man who has, I believe, single-handedly made this simply too big to ignore. Gentlemen, thanks to both of you. Always an absolute pleasure. Thank you. Now, moving on, the BBC have still not apologised to the mother of Jimmy Mizzen after promoting music of his drill rapper murderer. I'm joined next by the former BBC presenter, Danny Cadden. Trust me, he's got a lot to say on this matter. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
I'm Ellie Costello, and thank you so much for joining us here on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
according to a report from the RAC, many drivers see speed limits as a target rather than anything else. More than 50% of us think it's acceptable to break the speed limit.
So this morning we're asking, is it time to increase the motorway speed limit?
Let's talk to automotive journalists Danny Kelly and Steve Fowler. Gents, what a pleasure to speak to you both in one go.
I think we should join many countries in the European Union that have 130 kilometres speed limit, which is around about 81 miles an hour. I drive to London on a weekly basis, and I think the roads are capable of handling higher speeds. I think unofficially the speed limit, without getting pulled over by the local police at the time, is probably around about 78, 80 miles an hour. If a Bobby's on the motorway doing 70 miles an hour, he wants you to overtake him. He wants the free-flowing of that motorway to continue.
So should we change 70 miles an hour? You know, if people are going 80 miles an hour, just stick to 70 miles an hour as a limit. Yes, you know, it's funny when you're driving along the motorway and there's a police car going at 70 and nobody wants to overtake. But if the average is 80, just leave it at 70.
All the gantries now are fitted with the modern signage where they can change the limit at will. We all know that. It's hard to get up to 70 half the time. So, actually, we could apply those rules, couldn't we, at 80 or even 90 miles an hour and say, well, if the weather's bad, let's reduce it. If the fog's bad, let's reduce it.
Yeah, unfortunately, and I hate to use this phrase, smart motorways, but they're the ones where you have the adjustable limits. They don't cover all of the motorway network, relatively small amount of the motorway network. It is a limit. You know, it's not a target, as I keep saying to my kids. God, they're bored of me saying that.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Thank you, Britain.
Thank you for watching.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks for subscribing.
Thank you for your support.
It's you that make us the People's Channel.
As we reflect on our journey so far, we're filled with immense gratitude.
You mean the world to us. We couldn't have reached this point without you.
As a very special thank you, we are giving you the chance to win one of 50 GB News thank you boxes. They're worth £50 each.
For full terms and conditions and to enter, just go to gbnews.com/thank you.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 4:24 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, Never Hear Kier, his latest pit stop is in Poland. He's set to discuss a new defence agreement with Prime Minister Tusk with Poland. And joining us now is our political correspondent, Catherine Forster, live in Warsaw. Catherine, what's on the radar for Keir Starmer there in Warsaw today?
Yes, good afternoon, Martin. Well, it was Ukraine yesterday and Poland today. The Prime Minister, first of all, this morning went with Lady Starmer, his wife, to Auschwitz, that horrific Nazi concentration camp in Poland, which was, of course, occupied by Germany during the war. Obviously had a profound effect on him. Speaking about it a little bit earlier, he said he found it utterly harrowing. Said he felt a sickness and an air of desolation as he tried to comprehend the enormity of the barbarous, planned, industrialised murder of 1 million people. And I think it really brings home to him why he's here, which is fundamentally to help to try to keep us safe. It's all about security, national security. Ukraine, of course, borders Poland, and we don't know what is going to happen next week, do we, when Donald Trump becomes president again. But he's here today talking to another Donald Tusk, the Polish Prime Minister. Of course, we remember him, don't we, when he led the European Council during those tortuous Brexit negotiations. But they're talking about increased military cooperation, also working on cracking down on the people smuggling gangs that are basically facilitated by Russia and coming across through Belarus, a big problem here in Poland, talking about disinformation, talking about energy security, and so on and so forth. But, you know, there is real uneasiness here in Europe about what comes next when Trump comes in, because he's made it clear he wants the war in Ukraine to end. What and how that happens, we don't yet know. He's also been very, very firm on the fact that he says a lot of European countries simply not spending anything like enough on defence. He says that everybody should be spending 5% of GDP, that we can all afford it. Britain at the moment, I think around 2.3, a pledge to get to 2.5, but no firm timeline. Poland spending a whole lot more than that, but of course they are right next to Ukraine and not terribly far from Russia.
You know, it's interesting because Donald Tusk, he's one of my sparring partners when I was an MEP in Brussels, beloved of open borders. Suddenly, when he gets elected as Prime Minister, he puts up the barbed wire along the border with Belarus. He became more to the right than Nigel Farage. Perhaps some of that might rub off on Keir Starmer. Catherine Forster, thanks for joining us there live from Warsaw. Now, moving on, after the mother of murdered Jimmy Mizzen appeared on my show on GBNews yesterday, the drill rapper who murdered her son Jimmy has been sent back to jail and hope he stays there for a long time. But the BBC, who promoted his sick music, has still not apologised. Let's read out some of those sick lyrics, but a warning, some of them may disturb you. Sharpen up my blade, I've got to keep those necessary. Stay alert and keep it ready. Any corner could be deadly. Stuck it on a man and watched him melt like Ben and Jerry's. Now, bear in mind, those lyrics pertain directly to the murder of Jimmy Mizzen, and they were on the BBC. And joining me now is the former BBC journalist Danny Kelly. Danny Kelly, as a former BBC man yourself, this must bring a deep sense of shame that this thug, this murderer was promoted on the BBC. And even worse, they still have not apologised to Jimmy Mizzen's mother.
There's a couple of points here. The BBC, Martin, are adamant that they didn't know that this scumbag had released a video which was basically glorifying the death of poor old Jimmy at the age of 16. I think the poor lad was killed. Now, that, I believe, is questionable. I don't for one second, Martin, buy it completely that nobody in the production of the Radio 1 Extra show, either the presenters, the producers, the bookers, weren't aware of this incredibly well put together and expensive video. I've seen the video. It's not being shot on one of his mate's smartphones, Martin. This production glorifying the death of poor Jimmy must have cost thousands. And I, for one second, do not believe that nobody was aware that this fella had produced a song glorifying the murder of poor Jimmy. I don't know that, but I don't buy that. Now, all the BBC need to do, Martin, is just actually accept, rather than admit culpability, all they need to do is say, look, we didn't know he'd written a song about Jimmy's murder, but can we just express how sorry we are as an organisation for causing such distress? I saw your interview yesterday with that lady. What a powerful, gracious woman she is. And for this to be brought back by the national broadcaster, all they've got to do, Martin, it could be a conditional apology. They need to say, look, we're not apologising for playing the lad's song because we weren't aware, but we would like to. Heartfelt, sincere, contrite apology for causing such distress to you and your husband and all the family. That's all they need to do, Martin.
OK, let's just have a quick clip of that video, of that interview there that you mentioned from yesterday. I totally agree. It was very, very powerful. Here it is.
Absolutely beyond disgraceful. I can't believe that the BBC would do this. Now, I know that at the moment they're saying, well, they didn't know who he was, etc. But there must be ways of looking at these things. You know, perhaps people show their passports with a name or something, but they're making excuses. There's no excuses. They played his music, and you're playing the music of someone who's committed murder.
It's a very, very powerful point, well made, Danny Kelly. It's like if you're vetting people, say, to be in a political party, and the BBC love to jump on the facts if anybody makes a mistake, if they don't do their vetting correctly, how can they not vet? Particularly, we know there's a correlation between criminality and drill music. You don't need to be Poirot to work that one out. Surely it's a duty of care to make sure that anybody who appears on any BBC platform has a thorough background check.
Yet the irony is, in 2023, the BBC did a big investigation, interviewing drill artists, interviewing the Metropolitan Police, and they know exactly the harm and the connection and the conflation between drill music and stabbings and shootings. So the BBC, they're not myopic. They're fully aware of this because they did a documentary only 12 or 18 months ago. And I take it back to what that lady just said. She said she's even questioning whether the BBC were unaware of it. She said they're saying they're unaware that he wrote a song previously about my boy Jimmy. And that's the bit that I'm questioning as well. Martin, listen, I worked at the BBC for 18 years, and this is a music station. Radio 1 Extra is a music station dedicated to this type of music and hip-hop and music in general. You know, these are people who live and breathe music. And I, for one, would really like to be reassured that nobody at Radio 1 Extra was unaware of this lad's video, because I take it back to the video, Martin, it was a high-end production, and they want us to believe that nobody actually saw that high-end production. They weren't aware of that lad's song glorifying the death of Jimmy. That's the thing I struggle with.
Danny, can I quickly ask you, do you think that actually this is endemic of the BBC? I mean, for example, I used to work on Load Up magazine. They spent their entire life slamming the misogyny of anything to do with, like, white working class lads culture, but there seems to be a bit of a pass for the culture around hip-hop, around drill music. Oh, we can't criticise them in case it's a bit racist.
Yeah, the BBC, Martin, that's a great point. The BBC was captured in the aftermath of George Floyd's death. The whole media landscape changed. The BBC was captured by Black Lives Matter, and that's why people, if they tune into the BBC, they'll notice a lot more diversity, even down to the continuity announcers telling you that after the 7 o'clock news, you got EastEnders at 7:30, and that's being voiced by someone who is discernibly Afro-Caribbean. So they're overreaching. The Americans call it overreaching, and it's really peculiar because the black community, according to the 2021 census, made up 4% of the United Kingdom. My Sikh pals, my Indian Sikh pals, who make up 3.7% of the United Kingdom, they're saying, well, where's my representation? It just seems to be completely skewed and imbalanced. And I think it's all to do with the aftermath of the George Floyd killing and also the Black Lives Matter mob.
Yeah, great points well made, Danica. Thank you very much for coming on the show. Always an absolute pleasure. Now, I've got a quick statement here. The BBC has refused to comment on whether they would apologise to Jimmy's mother, Margaret. Why? But they've said this about Jake Fahey. This individual does not feature on any BBC playlists, and we have never played, as we pointed out to The Sun, the lyrics they have printed. He's had 2 other tracks played twice, and 1 Extra has no further plans to play his music. We were not aware of his background, and we in no way condone his actions. So there we go, clear as mud. Now, lots more still to come between now and 5 o'clock, including as Kemi Badenoch appeared to suggest the Tories might remove the pensions triple lock. I'll be joined by a furious campaigner. But first, major headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Martin, thank you. The top stories. The Israeli Security Cabinet has recommended approving the Gaza ceasefire and hostage return deal, which will go to a wider government vote to be finalised. Terror group Hamas is expected to release the first hostages under a Gaza ceasefire deal on Sunday, according to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. More than 46,000 Palestinians have been killed in that conflict, which started in October 2023, when Hamas-led militants killed almost 1,500 Israelis. The man who served 14 years in jail for the murder of schoolboy Jimmy Mizzen has been recalled to prison for breaching his licence conditions. Jake Fahry killed Jimmy and in 2008 was sentenced to 14 years behind bars. The 35-year-old was released on licence in June 2023 following his 14-year term, but was recalled yesterday morning. Part of the rapper's parole agreement includes being barred from entering the Greenwich Borough of London. But in music videos found by the Sun newspaper and also watched by his victim's family, Fahry, who goes by the alias 10, was filmed in front of Canary Wharf inside the area. Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy says the BBC should reflect on the decision to showcase the drill rapper, who was promoted on their 1 Extra radio station. In other news, retail sales fell by 0.3% in December despite the Christmas season. The latest retail figures, which are used to help showcase how high streets are performing, were released by the ONS this morning. Previous figures for November were seen as shaky when sales rose by just 0.1%. Sales still remain at 2.5% below pre-pandemic levels. And the funeral of Radio 2 presenter Johnny Walker took place this morning. Alongside colleagues and musicians, including Led Zeppelin's Robert Plant and Jeremy Vine, family and friends said goodbye to the DJ. Walker died at the age of 79 last month, with his death being announced on New Year's Eve by Bob Harris after he took over the veteran DJ's Sounds of the 70s show in November. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello again. Here's your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. Now, as we look ahead to the weekend, it is going to stay mostly dry, but towards the southeast in particular, it's going to remain pretty cold and pretty cloudy. We do have high pressure still dominating the picture across the UK, and this will remain for a little while yet, but there are some fronts trying to come in from the west. These will mainly be affecting northwestern parts. So here towards the northwest, a bit of blustery winds at times, some rain coming through, though actually overnight it's looking like it will be largely dry. Some clear skies across northern Scotland, allowing temperatures to drop. Elsewhere, a lot of cloud, perhaps some drizzly rain in a few places. And even with that blanket of cloud, temperatures actually taking a bit of a drop for quite a few places. Many areas falling close to, if not a bit below freezing. So a chilly start for many of us tomorrow morning, but quite a cloudy one. Even in the south, it is going to be quite cloudy. Could be a bit murky for some, perhaps some brighter breaks towards the north of Devon and Cornwall, and also some brighter breaks towards the north of Wales and across some parts of northern England. But on the whole, it is going to be a cloudy start. The greatest chance of any sunshine earlier on will be across northern parts of Scotland. Where the cloud is thick enough, there will be a few spots of drizzly rain around, and because temperatures are so low, particularly over higher ground, we could even see some snow grains developing at times, but these shouldn't cause any major problems. Otherwise, as we go through tomorrow, we're going to see a greater amount of sunshine compared to today, particularly across northern parts of England, around Wales, southwest England as well. Good chance of seeing some blue skies, but there will still be a bit of a north-south split when it comes to our temperatures, staying cold towards the south, further north and nearer normal or a little bit above average for the time of year. Little change as we go through the evening, staying cloudy for quite a few places, especially towards the southeast, but some clearer skies allowing temperatures to drop as we go into Sunday. Then the generally dry weather continues as we go into the beginning of next week, but it is going to be pretty cloudy. Bye-bye.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Alan Wright. In Oxfordshire, the M40 northbound is partly blocked after a collision. It's happened between junction 10 for the A43 and junction 11 at Banbury. In Berkshire, the M4 westbound is partly blocked by a breakdown just by the exit to Windsor at junction 6. In Kent, the clockwise M25 is partly blocked. There's another breakdown there around junction 1B for Dartford and the A296. In Somerset, the M5 northbound is partly blocked. There's a vehicle on fire there near Burnham-on-Sea at junction 22. In Hertfordshire, delays clockwise on the M25. That's in the roadworks between junction 22 at St Albans and 23 for the A1M.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. 4:39 is your time with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, last night, Kemi Badenoch appeared to suggest that the Tories might remove the pensions triple lock and means test it. But now the Tory leader has apparently clarified her view on the topic, saying on X, Labour punished poor pensioners, snatching away winter fuel payments due to poor means testing. We need better mechanisms, not proxies like pension credit or free school meals. So why are Labour, Reform and the Lib Dems pretending that we're cancelling the triple lock? Well, joining us now for more on this is Dennis Reed, the director of Silver Voices. Dennis, welcome to the show. Dennis, I had to get you on. I heard you on the radio earlier on a rival broadcaster. The guy almost needed an ambulance by the time you finished with him. You were absolutely magnificent. He was suggesting he agreed with the notion of means testing pensions, and you, of course, hit back. Tell me, first of all, what you think about the broad idea of any way of means testing pensions.
Well, yeah, I did give him a bit of a hard time, actually, Martin, but he riled me because he was so biased in favour of scrapping the triple lock. Look, the triple lock was supposed to be safe for the rest of this Parliament. Both major parties said that in their manifestos that the triple lock was secure, We've had lots of other problems with the Labour government, as you know, but, we hope that the triple lock was here to stay. And in fact, Labour actually say, well, even though we scrapped the winter fuel payment, you've still got the triple lock sort of thing. So hopefully it had gone to bed, but this is not the case. And there are concerns now in both major parties about the future of the triple lock. I think Kemi Badenoch made a big blunder, actually, because she was somewhat incoherent about what she was saying. She was saying that the triple lock itself should be means tested. Now, the triple lock, as you know, is just the increase, the cost of living increase each year, which can be a very low amount. It can be a few pounds a week. So would you set up a means testing apparatus to get a few pennies from a few pounds increase on top of the state pension? It just doesn't stand up. And it's quite clear that the Conservatives are backing away from that. The problem is that she's now given cover for Labour not to means test the triple lock, which could never take place, but means test the state pension itself. And that is the big issue.
And Dennis, you made an excellent point, and it's very straightforward. If you earn a lot of money in your life and you pay a huge amount of national insurance, you pay a huge amount of tax, and you're massively a net contributor, why should you have your pension means tested? You've paid a shed load of money in throughout your entire life. You deserve a little payback in your retirement, surely.
Well, yeah, and it's this whole concept that somehow the state pension is a gift from the state, a benefit from the state. But it's not like other benefits at all, because you pay into national insurance for your state pension, just like you pay into a private pension pot from your income. So you should be entitled, whatever your income in later life, you should be entitled to that basic state pension. And everybody can run into difficulties. You can suddenly go bankrupt, you can have family problems which result in real issues, and you regard that state pension as a safeguard, as the bulwark for at least guaranteeing a fair standard of living in your later years. So yeah, the whole argument against the state pension being a universal payment is a fallacy in my view.
So Dennis Reed, let's just think about how politically toxic it's been going after the winter fuel allowance. I was astonished that Kemi Badenoch would even talk about anything to do with means testing or the triple lock. You don't need to do it. You're years from power. But on the broader note, Dennis Reed, how politically mobilised have pensioners become since the winter fuel allowance? And can you send a message out? Mess with the triple lock at thy peril.
Well, exactly my words. I would say tamper with it at your peril, but more or less what you said, Martin. Yes, I mean, all major parties will reap the rewards in terms of their electoral defeat if they try and tamper with the triple lock. Pensioners are 12.5 million people. They are becoming more and more mobilised as more and more attacks rain down on them. So yes, I mean, we are a significant influence on the outcome of the next election. So lay off the triple lock is my message to the two major parties.
I think that's as clear as the nose on your face. That's a message, I think, that's been so resolutely, obvious since the winter fuel allowance cut. I hear from pensioners all the time on the show. They've never been political in their lives. Suddenly, they are. And pensioners vote. Pensioners care. Pensioners turn out. Pensioners, I believe, are the most important people in the country. They've built this nation. They kept it afloat. And Dennis Reed, once again, hats off to you, sir. That performance earlier on, honestly, the guy needed an ambulance. Dennis Reed, the director of Silver Voices, thank you very, very much indeed for joining us today on the show. Now, next, we'll be crossing to supposedly the best boozer in Britain. Cheers to that, although I've got a little story about it. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
People living with obesity are people, and they deserve the right for treatment and care as much as anyone else. What we need to understand is that obesity is a chronic condition, or a disease, as some people call it. It's not a choice. And this is the bit that people really struggle with, is that people think this is a lifestyle choice and people have done this to themselves. What we now know is the science and the evidence shows us that this isn't a choice. People have genetic predispositions for living with obesity. What we need to do is be a bit more compassionate and caring to people that live with obesity and support them to make healthier choices, not actually just discriminate and tell them that they're doing something wrong when, you know, if I had asthma, for instance, you wouldn't be saying the same thing to me there. But then it's exactly the same.
Usually, if you're going for an operation of some form or other, there'll be often there is a criteria. So my mother, she had a knee operation. They wanted to make sure her blood pressure was right and all these things. This is, I mean, to hear somebody say that obesity isn't a choice just because you've got genetic predisposition to it, it's just exactly why people seem to be legitimising being overweight. Ozempic has proved that people are overweight because they eat too much. Because Ozempic tells you to stop eating, it makes you think that you've eaten and makes you feel full, so you don't eat. You may be predisposed to anything, but you also have a large percentage of responsibility to make sure that doesn't happen. So absolutely, it is in the patient's best interests, because if you're overweight, it'll take you longer to heal. You're more likely to have complications, the same if you smoke, and also the outcomes are usually better. So for a smoker, if you quit, say 4 weeks before surgery, your 25%, your risk is lower of respiratory complications. So this is literally, of course, it's discriminatory, because you have to decide, you have to prioritise the people that are likely to survive the operations.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Pearce. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:48 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, it's pints all round today at one very special boozer in Shropshire. The Bailey Head has been crowned the Pub of the Year by the Campaign for Real Ale. It's the first time they've been awarded the honour, and owners Duncan and Grace couldn't be prouder. Well, I'm now joined by GB News' West Midlands reporter Jack Carson, who's got the story. Jack, every time you get these gigs, mate, I'm thinking, I've got the wrong job. You're always in pubs, swigging pints. Now it's the Pub of the Year in Oswestry, a part of Britain I know very, very well. Tell us about the boozer.
Well, I feel like I've got not only the best job in the world, Martin, but I feel like I'm also gaining a bit of a reputation for being some kind of pub correspondent, but I'm not going to complain at that. Of course, the people around me, as you can see here, in the Bailey Head, in Oswestry, in Shropshire, having a fantastic time celebrating this win. A few hours ago, we had the official presentation of the plaque declaring them the CAMRA, that's the Campaign for Real Ale's National Pub of the Year. We spoke to the owners a little bit earlier on to get their reaction. Here's what they told us.
I think we're both just stunned. I don't think we've had the chance to really feel like we're celebrating. I mean, we've known since the 22nd of December, and we've had to keep it quiet for a long time. We've managed to tip off some regulars, but both of us are just sort of, I think, walking around in a bit of a daze still.
It was a total shock to win. And yeah, it feels like a massive accolade to hard work and the support from our customers and our families and people who've made it happen. It's been a very hard 9 years in the pub industry with COVID, the energy crisis, all those things have had knock-ons on the licensed trade and on the brewing industry. So to be here today it's quite humbling.
We've tried to just build it as being a very inclusive place. I think from day one we said that we'd like to be a pub where a woman could come in and sit and have a drink in a corner by herself and read a book, or join in with other people and just feel comfortable without all the things that you get in a lot of pubs of loud sport and overpowering music and that sort of thing. It just needs to be a relaxed but enjoyable place to sit and have a drink and chat with people.
Well, look, they're very proud owners, as you can hear there. You know, they've built this place up over the last almost decade, 9 years. This pub really was owned by a major pub company. It was starting to fail in this town, but it's been brought back to life, reignited. You listen there, the very key aim for them was to making sure absolutely anybody was able to walk into this pub, Martin, sit down on their own or have a pint. I mean, I have made 3 new friends today just by sitting at the table with them this afternoon, chatting about every kind of thing under the sun. That is the whole point, really, isn't it, of a great British boozer, that it sits within the heart of its community. The Campaign for Real Ale has over 100,000 members all across the country, ensuring that communities have a good pub to go to, have certainly a good selection of beers in order to be able to drink as well. And the pubs in this competition are judged on a range of different things, whether it's the decor, and we've got some fantastic, you know, traditional wooden beams around us. I'm stood actually right in front of the wall with their, you know, tens of awards, from runner-up prizes to winning, you know, Market Town Pub of the Year even. This pub has won multiple awards, but this year, this is the first time they've won that big, the coveted prize that pubs up and down the country wish to win, the Britain's Best Boozer, as according to the Campaign for Real Ales. There is a fantastic atmosphere in this, Martin. Lots of people, like myself, enjoying a little bit of a drink here as well to celebrate their big day today.
Now, Jack Carson, I know Oswestry well. I stood on a by-election there. I've drank in every pub in that town many, many times, trust me. But I've got a simple question for you. Why, in the Campaign for Real Ales Pub of the Year, are you drinking what appears to be a generic pint of Italian lager? Jack Carson, you're fired.
I had a traditional ale earlier. We were in a bit of a time, a bit of a quick dash to try and get a pint, so I could, of course, cheers to you, Martin, on air as well. But this is, as I say, this is going down very well, and there is. I mean, it's the thing about a pub being in the community. They've got alcohol, you know, beers of alcohol of 0.5%, non-alcoholic beers, all the way up to stouts at a 12%. So they really do cater for absolutely everybody. But I'm driving, Martin, so I've got to go a little bit steady on them today.
Jack Carson, always an absolute pleasure. And bottoms up, my old son, thank you. As again, you get all the best jobs. Jack Carson there, look at that, in the Bailey's Head in Oswestry. That's getting to down it in one, but actually, you might get nicked for drink driving on the way home. Now, I've got a bit of a story about the Bailey Head. I was asked to leave it one time. I was in the area. It was during the time of mask mandates. Some pubs made you wear a mask inside. Do you remember that time where you couldn't get COVID if you were sitting down, but you could if you're walking around? Well, I didn't want to get involved in that business, and the governor there, who's won that award today, asked me to leave. He did indeed. I went to the Fox, and the landlady there, Mandy, I've got to say, the Fox in Oswestry is my favourite pub in Oswestry. Spent many a forlorn winter's evening in there. Look, it's a cracking part of Britain with some great juicers. Well done there to the Bailey's Head, despite the fact they kicked me out. Thanks, Jack Carson. Now moving on. Lots of you are getting in touch. We don't have time to do that now. We will do some in the next hour. Loads of you are furious about pensions. Stick away from our pensions. We'll have the latest on the grooming gang scandal next, and the backlash, and also an update on farmers. That's all next. Plus Keir Starmer live from Warsaw. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel. Now's your weather.
A chilly start will give way to a lovely, warm afternoon. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again. Here's your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. Now, as we look ahead to the weekend, it is going to stay mostly dry, but towards the southeast in particular, it's going to remain pretty cold and pretty cloudy. We do have high pressure still dominating the picture across the UK, and this will remain for a little while yet, but there are some fronts trying to come in from the west. These will mainly be affecting northwestern parts. So here towards the northwest, a bit of blustery winds at times, some rain coming through, though actually overnight it's looking like it will be largely dry. Some clear skies across northern Scotland, allowing temperatures to drop. Elsewhere, a lot of cloud, perhaps some drizzly rain in a few places, and even with that blanket of cloud, temperatures actually taking a bit of a drop for quite a few places. Many areas falling close to, if not a bit below freezing. So a chilly start for many of us tomorrow morning, but quite a cloudy one. Even in the south, it is going to be quite cloudy. Could be a bit murky for some, perhaps some brighter breaks towards the north of Devon and Cornwall, and also some brighter breaks towards the north of Wales and across across some parts of northern England, but on the whole it is going to be a cloudy start. The greatest chance of any sunshine earlier on will be across northern parts of Scotland. Where the cloud is thick enough, there will be a few spots of drizzly rain around, and because temperatures are so low, particularly over higher ground, we could even see some snow grains developing at times, but these shouldn't cause any major problems. Otherwise, as we go through tomorrow, we're going to see a greater amount of sunshine compared to today, particularly across northern parts of England, around Wales, southwest England as well. Good chance of seeing some blue skies, but there will still be a bit of a north-south split when it comes to our temperatures, staying cold towards the south, further north and nearer normal or a little bit above average for the time of year. Little change as we go through the evening, staying cloudy for quite a few places, especially towards the southeast, but some clearer skies allowing temperatures to drop as we go into Sunday. Then the generally dry weather continues as we go into the beginning of next week, but it is going to be pretty cloudy. Bye-bye.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Alan Wright. In Cambridgeshire, the A14 is partly blocked eastbound for repairs. They're between junction 22 at Brampton and 23 for Godmanchester. In Hertfordshire, delays on the M25 clockwise. That's queuing in the roadworks area between junction 22 at St Albans and 23 for the A1M. In Kent, the M25 clockwise is partly blocked after a breakdown. It's just by the exit to Dartford at junction 1B. Near Bristol, the M32 northbound is partly blocked by a breakdown at junction 1 for Hambrook. And in Berkshire, the M4 westbound is partly blocked by a breakdown just by junction 8 for Maidenhead and the A404M.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
You could be joining the Great British Giveaway list of winners with your chance to grab a fantastic £50,000 in tax-free cash.
Hi, I'm Angela from Wigan and I won £30,000 with the Great British Giveaway. I'd say to people who want to enter or are wondering whether to enter to do it, it happens to people like me.
For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very, very happy afternoon to you. It's 5 p.m. and a happy Friday. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. Broadcasting for you live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, Labour's proposal for just 5 locally led rape gang inquiries have been blasted as a disgraceful whitewash by survivors and campaigners. And with 73% of all voters demanding a full national inquiry, is this scandal now simply too big to ignore? And coming up soon, I'll be crossing live to Warsaw, where Sir Keir Starmer is set to launch a new defence treaty with his Polish counterpart, Donald Tusk. He's also expected to address the latest in the grooming gang scandal after he's interrogated by the world's press. So stay tuned for all of that. So never hear Keir. The latest pit stop is Poland. He'll be talking in a short while about a defence agreement with Donald Tusk. Donald Tusk, my old sparring partner in Brussels. He was head of the European Council and he was all in favour of open borders, all in favour of being liberal. And then he was elected as the Premier of Poland. Now he's to the right of Nigel Farage. There's barbed wire on the border with Belarus. He closed down the state media and is even talking about capping immigration. Funny what it does to get into power, isn't it? Perhaps some of that might rub off on Sir Keir Starmer, and the world's press surely will be giving him a severe grilling on the topic of grooming gangs and other domestic politics. That's all coming soon. Get in touch, GBNews.com/your say. But now's your headlines, and here's Tatiana Sanchez.
Martin, thank you. The top stories from the GB newsroom this hour. A Nazi-obsessed man who tried to stab an asylum seeker to death has been jailed. Callum Parslow was handed a life sentence and will serve a minimum term of 22 years and 8 months in prison after he attacked a man at a hotel in Worcestershire in April last year as a protest against small boat crossings. The 32-year-old has Hitler's signature tattooed on his arm and used a knife worth over £700 he'd purchased online to attack Nahum Hagos. The victim, who was stabbed in the chest and hand, said it was a miracle that he'd survived. The man, who served 14 years in jail for the murder of schoolboy Jimmy Mizzen, has been recalled to prison for breaching his licence conditions. Jake Fahry killed Jimmy and in 2008 was sentenced to 14 years behind bars. The 35-year-old was released on licence in June, almost 2 years ago, following his 14-year term, but was recalled yesterday morning. Part of the rapper's parole agreement includes being barred from entering the Greenwich Borough of London. But in music videos found by the Sun newspaper and watched by his victim's family, Fahry, who goes by the alias 10, was filmed in front of Canary Wharf inside the area. Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy says the BBC should reflect on the decision to showcase the drill rapper, who was promoted on their One Extra radio station. GB News spoke to Jimmy's mother.
I think it's absolutely beyond disgraceful. I can't believe that the BBC would do this. Now, I know that at the moment they're saying, well, they didn't know who he was, etc. But there must be ways of looking at these things. You know, perhaps people show their passports with a name or something, but they're making excuses. There's no excuses. They played his music, and you're playing the music of someone who's committed murder.
Now, in other news this hour, TikTok is to be banned in the US from Sunday if it's not sold by its Chinese parent company, the Supreme Court has today ruled. It found the law banning the social media platform did not violate the First Amendment rights of TikTok and its 170 million users. However, President Joe Biden says he won't enforce the ban for the few remaining hours he's in office, leaving it up to President-elect Donald Trump to decide what to do when he enters the White House on Monday. After the Supreme Court ruling, the White House released a statement saying TikTok should remain available to Americans. Elsewhere, the Israeli Security Cabinet has recommended approving the Gaza ceasefire and hostage return deal, which will go to a wider government vote to be finalised. Terror group Hamas is expected to release the first hostages under a Gaza ceasefire deal on Sunday, according to Benjamin Netanyahu. More than 46,000 Palestinians have been killed in the conflict, which began in October 2023 when Hamas-led militants killed almost 1,500 Israelis. Sir Keir Starmer says the defence and security deal with Poland will bring closer collaboration between the UK and its eastern allies. The Prime Minister continues his visit to Europe, promising to take Britain's partnership with Poland to the next level. Meeting his Polish counterpart Donald Tusk, the pair are expected to discuss how the countries can combat people smuggling gangs and Russian aggression. Yesterday, Sir Keir Starmer signed a 100-year deal with Ukraine while visiting the war-torn country. In other news, Sir Ed Davey has welcomed the government's announcement for a series of local inquiries into the grooming gang scandal. The Home Secretary announced government-backed local reviews in 5 areas yesterday. stopping short of committing to a full-scale national inquiry. A lawyer representing victims told GB News there may be hundreds of thousands of victims in every town and city across the country. The Liberal Democrats leader said action is needed more quickly.
If we're going to be tough, yeah, let's have the inquiry. Just as you say, you're quite right about that. But I don't think we should let the government get away with not taking the action now. We need to take the action now. And I think that's what Liberal Democrats would urge the government and all opposition parties. And I'm sure you would agree, we do need action now.
And those are the latest GB News headlines. More from me in half an hour.
Thank you, Tatiana. Now, just to remind you, Sir Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, will be speaking live from Poland in about 15 minutes' time. But before that, let's return to domestic news that Blackburn's Member of Parliament has dramatically backed calls for a public inquiry into the grooming of vulnerable young women and girls, saying that the issue continues to haunt the town. And the independent MP, Adnan Hussain, he said this: like so many of my constituents, I'm horrified by the abuse and sexual exploitation of predominantly white working-class girls in mostly northern towns at the hands of grooming gangs. Well, let's get more now with our national reporter, Charlie Peters. Charlie, I think this is entirely something we should be welcoming. Adnan Hussain, a British Muslim himself, in Blackburn, has the fourth highest proportion of Muslim voters in the entire country, around about 46%. So the fact that he's calling for transparency and an inquiry, this is an amazing piece of news.
Yes, Martin, in the last hour, I incorrectly said that Adnan Hussain had voted against the inquiry. Actually, he abstained from the votes last week. I'm happy to correct the record on that. And he abstained because he's described that Tory amendment as a wrecking bill that would get in the way of the government's children's well-being proposals. Now, Adnan Hussain did reflect specifically on correspondence from his local constituents when he went back from Parliament over the weekend, saying that many people have got in touch regarding this issue. And I've seen plenty of people from Blackburn on social media referring to this. And it's quite a powerful statement from the independent MP, an MP elected after campaigning on a supposedly pro-Gaza ticket in the election just gone in last July. So a very influential voice, frankly, from the Muslim community, because so far the only Muslim politician that we've seen calling for this national inquiry has been Khalid Mahmood, who is a former Labour MP. He was representing a Birmingham seat from 2005 to 2024. So Adnan Hussain's intervention could carry some weight, as we're now seeing members from all parties and those from none calling for this public national inquiry, which has led to some criticism also of the government's announcement yesterday for those local reviews. The Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philps, said that they won't have statutory footing, they won't have the power to compel witnesses. That criticism was echoed in a question by Sarah Champion, the Labour MP for Rotherham, who has said in the week and has said many times before that you need to be able to compel witnesses, to challenge people, to grill them, so that people can be held accountable, not just for perpetrating this abuse, but potentially also those who covered it up, either by corruption or by political correctness. Those are concerns that people have all over the country, that this has been covered up in their towns and cities. But yes, another significant intervention with that independent MP for Blackburn calling for a public national inquiry.
Yeah, and Charlie, just to echo something that Mr Hussain said last Saturday on social media, which I was very positive about. He said this: British Pakistanis are not responsible for the crimes of rapists and paedophiles just because they happen to be of the same ethnicity as these criminals. We can all agree with that. Hurrah, totally correct. He goes on, the demonising of a whole minority group by some politicians and the media is deeply troubling and, in fact, highly dangerous. So we need the data. We need the truth, and we need a full national inquiry. Astonishing, Charlie Peters, Adnan Hussain, the independent MP for Blackburn, perhaps he now belongs to the far right. Couldn't make it up. Charlie Peters, thank you very much for joining us on the show. Thank you. Now, let's continue this conversation now in the studio and bring in the head of domestic policy at Pictall House, Jacob Williams. Jacob, welcome to the studio. So a fascinating report that you guys have brought out. It's called A National Crisis, the Urgent Need for a National Inquiry into Grooming Gangs, echoing in many ways there what Mr Adnan Hussain is calling for. Tell us about the findings of your report.
What we found is that the existing evidence that we have, the existing data we have from this 2022 report, from the local inquiries, is just totally inadequate. There is so much we don't know about this appalling scandal, about these terrible crimes that have been committed. We don't know exactly the precise role of concerns about race, about ethnicity, about being accused of being Islamophobic. There is evidence from many of these local reports these concerns played a part. This is why we need a fully transparent national inquiry to put everything on the table, give everyone transparency, and actually diffuse these extreme narratives that are implicitly suggesting that whole communities are to blame, which don't actually help anyone.
But by the same token, not allowing a conversation around ethnicity has been the root cause of this problem from the very, very beginning. So we can all agree that we need some transparent data on ethnicity and perhaps even on faith. And we do have some of that, but you think that this is fanning the flames. It's not helpful.
I don't think that it's helpful to talk about this fanning the flames. I don't buy into this narrative that we should just be criticising those who use the data that does exist automatically as accusing them of being racist or Islamophobic. That doesn't really help anyone because the focus here needs to be on the victims. But what is very, very important to acknowledge is the data we have is very flawed, is very incomplete. So there are some surveys of, for example, people who've been convicted of sex crimes, and it suggests that the racial balance is about what you'd expect in the general population. But it's very incomplete data.
That's not true. And let's go through some of that data now, because there are some of the key statistics that our reporter Charlie Peters gathered in his investigation into grooming gangs. Let's look at some of them now. The 2018 Home Office report into grooming gangs claimed that the perpetrators' ethnicity roughly balanced to 30% white and 28% Asian. Now, when you look at proportionality versus population, that's despite white individuals making up over 85% of the population and those of Asian descent just 8%. So proportionality, it's clear that British Pakistani men are much more likely to be involved in grooming gangs. And a study in the Home Office report shows that 1 in 2,200 Muslims were prosecuted for related offences from 1997 to 2017. But when narrowed down to those of Pakistani heritage, it came to 1 in 1,700. And when narrowed down again to Rochdale, it became 1 in 280. And in Telford, it was 1 in 167. In Rotherham, it was 1 in just 73. And some data out last week, a week ago, by the Hydrant programme concluded with total clarity, Jacob, that Pakistani men are 4 times more likely to be behind grooming gangs. So it's incorrect to say this is fanning the flames. The facts are the facts.
Well, let's make a very simple fact, and let's get this out on the table, that this point about grooming gangs refers to a very specific pattern of abuse that does appear to be particularly common among a particular ethnic community. Yeah. There are also distinctive patterns of abuse in other communities, inside the Catholic Church, for example. These are pathological subcultures, so it's not helpful to say the entire Asian community, the whole of Asian culture.
Nobody's saying that. The facts, Jacob, are the facts. Pakistani men are 4 times more likely to be behind grooming gangs, and that's from the data we have. And it's only collected historically in 30% of cases. We have a problem. We need to address it head on. We're not talking about the Catholic Church in this instance. The mass rape of white working class girls in Britain was ostensibly by British Pakistani men. Fact.
Well, that does appear to be a fact. The point is that grooming gangs are not all sex offences. So we can't just say that, therefore, Muslims or Asians are more likely to be sex offenders. That isn't helpful. But I agree with you. This grooming gangs thing is ethnically inflected. It is culturally inflected. It's a pathological subculture. That's absolutely correct. And we need a full national inquiry to find out exactly what is going on, what still might be going on, and how we can put a stop to it once and for all.
What's your take on the thorny topic of gathering crime data by nationality? I mean, they do that in lots of liberal societies such as Denmark, such as Sweden. They record this, they log it, they publish it. We don't have that data in Britain. What do you think the establishment is afraid of? I mean, facts are facts. Facts aren't racist.
Well, I completely agree with you. Facts are not racist. We need all the facts on the table. The public deserve to know. The public deserve to fully understand what has happened. And that's the only way racism is going to be diffused, by having full and open transparency.
What's your take on, I mean, Mr Adnan is saying there, getting involved in the dialogue, I think is entirely healthy, because we need more British Muslims to be calling out bad behaviour of toxic British Muslims.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more, and I want to emphasise that the vast majority, the overwhelming majority of British Muslims find these crimes abhorrent and disgusting and unequivocally condemn them.
Jake Williams, we have to leave it there. Let's cross now to the Prime Minister, just about to start speaking, alongside his Polish counterpart, Donald Tusk. Here we go.
Prezesa Rady Ministrów Donalda Tuska. Panie premierze, bardzo proszę.
Dziękuję bardzo. Dobry wieczór. Dear Keir, dear Prime Minister, welcome to Warsaw. Bardzo się cieszę, że mogę dzisiaj gościć tu w Warszawie naszego wypróbowanego przyjaciela, pana premiera. Dzisiaj możemy mówić o szczególnie bliskich i dobrych relacjach między Wielką Brytanią i Polską, też między nami. Nasze osobiste relacje dobrze oddają to, co dzieje się między naszymi państwami. Mamy do siebie pełne zaufanie w tych trudnych czasach niepewności geopolitycznej, radykalnych zmian, w czasach wojny tuż koło naszej granicy. Zaufanie, pewność własnych intencji, przewidywalność są bezcenne i w naszych relacjach, i to chcę podkreślić z całą mocą, w naszych relacjach te wartości, te zasady są widoczne gołym okiem. Możemy na siebie liczyć i to w każdym z tych trudnych tematów, jakie dzisiaj poruszyliśmy. Po pierwsze, dziękuję za Twoje osobiste zaangażowanie w intensywne prace na rzecz tego dokumentu, który mam nadzieję w tym roku podpiszemy, o naszej współpracy w dziedzinie bezpieczeństwa i obrony. To będzie bardzo dobra puenta tego, co w praktyce robimy. Nieprzypadkowo w czasie dzisiejszego spotkania tyle czasu poświęciliśmy wspólnemu bezpieczeństwu. Wróciłeś dopiero co z Kijowa. Myśmy gościli kilkadziesiąt godzin temu prezydenta Zeleńskiego tutaj. Wiadomo, że wojna w Ukrainie jest wciąż głównym tematem rozmów liderów. Z Wielką Brytanią i osobiście z panem premierem mamy identyczne poglądy na sytuację.
Okay, that's Donald Tusk there, obviously speaking in Polish in Warsaw. We're waiting for the Prime Minister, our Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, to speak. On the table, the big are a new defence pact, defence and security treaty, because of course the world is about to change in the shape of Donald Trump, not Donald Tusk, Donald Trump coming into power, expected to be making all sorts of demands about NATO commitments, wants much more money from European democracies to put in. Many countries in NATO pay way below the 3%. In fact, Poland is one of the few that does pay over their odds. And I think, are we going to Sir Keir Starmer now? I know for a fact that Donald Tusk, I've seen him speak in Brussels when I was a Member of Parliament. This guy does not do short speeches. He tends to speak not only in paragraphs, but in entire Bibles. He likes the sound of his own voice. And by the way, Donald Tusk, when he was in Brussels, was beloved of open borders. This is the leader, remember, who said no cherries on top of the Brexit deal. He talked down the Brexit arrangement repeatedly when Theresa May was going to and fro. No cherries on top, he said. And then when he made his pitch to be the Prime Minister of Poland, he seemed to have an awakening. He was no longer beloved of open borders because the Polish conservative movement, which runs the country, is very into strict border control. In fact, its border with Belarus, which is seen as an in-through from Russia, is a porous border that's now barricaded with watchtowers and barbed wire and armed guards. And this infuriated Brussels, and Donald Tusk said, well, tough. That's what the Polish electorate want. And he also has gone to war with Brussels over coal fields on net zero. So suddenly, in power in Poland, Donald Tusk became something of a populist. In fact, I put him to the right of Nigel Farage. Incredible when you think about it. He was one of Nigel Farage's most outspoken critics. And it's incredible what people do when they want to get into power. I digress. back to what might be discussed today. This, of course, is Ukraine. Ukraine is going to be on the table. Donald Trump said he could end that war in 24 hours. Well, that's big talk. But on Monday, when he is inaugurated, no doubt straight after the ceasefire that's been announced this week between Hamas and Israel and Gaza, next on the table will be Ukraine. Where does that leave the West? One of today's topics of conversation will be boots on ground from the Brits, perhaps for a 100-year deal. Sir Keir Starmer talks about today, where Brits will be on the ground manning that corridor between East and West. Polish troops will be alongside British troops, is what we're hearing. To protect the UK's national security, we will partner with Poland to get boots on the ground to keep Putin at bay. Will that work? Is it necessary? How many more millions will we give away to Ukraine before Donald Trump ends this war? We don't know. But this is a big deal for our international security partners. This is the kind of thing that Sir Keir Starmer said he would do on the world stage, building closer alliances with our European partners. Now, does that mean a slow crawl back towards Brussels? Many people watching this Never Hear Keir roadshow, which is centred largely around Brussels, largely around Germany, France and now Poland, see this as a creep back towards a European power base at a time when perhaps our eyes should be better spent on a relationship with Washington, D.C. And I wonder if I could bring you back in, Jacob. You're a huge studier of liberalism in the world across European states. Do you think Sir Keir Starmer philosophically is much more drawn towards the liberalism of Brussels and of Europe than he is the capitalism, perhaps the populism of the United States?
It certainly seems that Starmer has a visceral distaste for populism, and this idea of liberalism and open borders, it's very much something that when people are in power, as we've just seen with Tusk, the practical reality is that every country does want to control its borders to some degree. The British people voted to do that in 2016, and yet migration keeps going up, and there are very understandable concerns on all sides.
Do you think there could be a kind of awakening of that populist within Sir Keir Starmer? He talks a lot about smashing the gangs. He talks a lot about border control, of getting immigration down. Do you think his heart's in it? Because philosophically, politically, that's the opposite of what he's been practising for his entire political career.
I mean, in many ways, Sir Keir Starmer is a lawyer. In many ways, he's someone who's deeply committed to the whole set of institutions that have grown up over the last 20, 25 years that do impose big constraints on what a government can do unless it's willing to really break with consensus and break with the norm, especially on the topic of borders. So if that is his instinct, he's going to have a hard time putting it into practice.
Sir Keir Starmer is nodding along there because, of course, anybody who knows international politics will know he's got that earpiece there. He'll be getting Donald Tusk's now prolonged speech translated in real time in his ear. That's why he's nodding along to what he's saying. As I said, Mr Tusk doesn't do short speeches. Some of his speeches have been known to go on as long as a Wagner opera. I digress, but seriously, this guy likes the sound of his own voice. Do you think Britain's place on the world stage is weaker now than it has been historically, particularly with Donald Trump coming in? And what do you make of the demands for more NATO payments, and we don't have the money to even pay them?
I think Britain's place on the world stage has become weaker, and it really ought to be recovered by taking a more independent stance on many of these issues. I mean, Britain has been following American policy in many parts of the world, including, of course, the Middle East, and really acting as a junior partner. This hasn't contributed to our own sovereignty and our own national interest.
Still waiting for Sir Keir Starmer to speak. Earlier on, we learned from our political correspondent Catherine Forster that Sir Keir Starmer and his wife had a tour earlier on of Auschwitz, of course, which is in Poland. The Prime Minister was said to be deeply moved by that experience, as anybody would be who's been there. And of course, we still have huge issues in this nation around anti-Semitism on our streets. Perhaps Keir Starmer might come back with a tougher position on that. Is there anything, Jacob, in this notion of never hear Keir? He's always seems to be on a foreign jaunt when there's domestic issues, there's domestic crises here, the current one being the rape gang scandal. The world's press, we know, are waiting there. The British press are waiting, and they never seem to ask him about why he's in a foreign country. They always seem to go straight for the domestic trouble that's haunting the Labour Party back in Britain.
I can't comment on the Prime Minister's personal schedule, but what I can say is the political class as a whole are clearly the object of a lot of distaste for their perceived lack of interest in the problems we're facing at home. Naturally, the big example being this appalling crisis with grooming gangs, and they do need to be more responsive to the British people.
Okay, and we are still waiting for Keir Starmer there. As I did warn you about 10 minutes ago, Donald Tusk doesn't do short speeches. We're still just trying to wait for him to come back through. But I think it is fascinating to talk about Britain standing on the world stage, because that could all change on Monday. It sincerely could. Donald Trump is, I think, going to make huge demands of the entire world on NATO. He said years ago that the world isn't paying enough. America is paying billions and billions of dollars to keep the world safe. Europe doesn't pay its way. Germany, it's astonishing how little they pay in. And do you think we're going to see now a new regime of, cough up and pay for your own security?
I'm not in the business of foreseeing the future, but it is quite likely that certainly Americans equally are angry at their political class for their perceived lack of interest in the problems faced by Middle America, one of them being the way in which Europe has been free-riding on American security. This is going to be an issue that won't go away.
And what has been a pattern of Sir Keir Starmer's recent jaunts abroad is that, as I said, the British journalists won't be asking him questions about why he's here today. We know British journalists are going to be asking him about the rape gangs inquiry. Is it sufficient? Is this a scandal that will not go away? Whenever Starmer seems to go abroad these days, the questions are about what's happening in Britain. I think now we are going to Keir Starmer.
It's a real pleasure to be here today. You will remember back in July, when I just started as Prime Minister, I told you about my wife's family roots here in Poland. And of course we talked about our shared passion for Arsenal Football Club, which is not what we spent an hour talking about this afternoon, I can assure you. So this was always going to be a great partnership. But there is so much that brings our two nations together. You've touched on some of these important issues, the deep bonds of family, of history, of friendship, shared values and shared interests. The Polish pilots who gave their lives in the Battle of Britain, the Polish government in exile, which we hosted for many years in my part of London. And I think our two countries are as close as ever today, because we have a shared view of the challenges that are before us. Those challenges were the focus, of course, for our meeting this afternoon, and we strengthened we talked about how we can strengthen our economic ties, boosting a trade relationship that is already worth £30 billion. How can we do more together on energy security and climate? And how can we deepen our cooperation on migration? Poland, of course, faces Belarus and Russia, facilitating criminal gangs, driving migrants over the border. We discussed this, horrendously exploiting innocent people. So we're determined to work more closely together to smash the vile gangs that operate across Europe. And of course, we spent much of our time today focusing on defence and security. As two of Europe's biggest military powers, with our troops serving together, guarding the eastern flank, we share an unbreakable commitment to NATO and an unbreakable commitment to Ukraine. So, Donald, I want to thank you for everything that you have done to support Ukraine. That's been a huge and important part of the defence of Ukraine, and it is important that we recognise that and we say thank you to that, and of course to the President as well. We're clear together that the route to a just and lasting peace comes through strength. The strength to secure that peace on Ukraine's terms, and the strength to maintain it. And we will work with allies to that end, to step up our efforts, to put Ukraine in the strongest position now, and guarantee that Ukraine will be able to defend herself and deter Russia in the future. The defence of Ukraine is vital for the defence of Europe. Poland currently holds the presidency of the EU Council, and I want to congratulate you, Donald, on making European security the focus of your presidency, because this is the issue of our time. This is where the challenge is that we must rise to. Now, we share your view that this is the central issue. The scale of the threat to Europe today must be matched by the scale of our collective response. I'm determined to deepen our security collaboration, both with the EU and, of course, bilaterally. And I'm very pleased that we have agreed today to launch negotiations on a new UK-Poland security and defence treaty, covering all aspects of the threats that we face and the steps that we must take to meet them. This includes deepening ties between our defence industries. The UK has secured £8 billion of defence deals in Poland over the last 3 years alone. And we're going further today, opening a new joint programme office in Bristol to deliver our £4 billion partnership, to deliver the next generation of air defence system to Poland. Through our new treaty, we will keep deepening these ties, exploring what more we can do for our shared security, and ensuring that this is a strong strategic partnership to rival any other. In closing, I want to say that this is a moment for determination, yes, but it's also a moment for reflection. This month, we mark Holocaust Memorial Day and the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, when the full horror of the Holocaust was exposed for the world to see. I visited Auschwitz earlier today. I stood on those railway tracks, looked at the shoes and the suitcases piled high, the hair, the teeth, taken from those murdered by the Nazis. For 8 decades, the memories and pain of what the Jewish people suffered, of what Poland and others suffered in that camp, has been passed from country to country, generation to generation, family to family. I'll never forget what I saw today, and I'll never forget my responsibility to pass this on to the next generation, to remember, to learn, and to respect our solemn promise: never again. That is our duty now and always. Thank you.
Dziękuję i mamy czas na 4 pytania. Proszę o zadanie pierwszego. Telewizja Polska.
Dzień dobry, Rafał Skórski, Telewizja Polska, TVP Info. To jeszcze raz. Telewizja Polska, Rafał Skórski, TVP Info. Pytanie do obu panów premierów. Kilka dni temu w Polsce gościli ministrowie obrony grupy E5, między innymi zastępca sekretarza obrony Zjednoczonych
That was Keir Starmer there addressing Warsaw alongside Donald Tusk. They're currently taking media questions. Polish media first. Is the pecking order? We'll hover over this and wait for British journalists to come in. And just a quick recap there of what Sir Keir Starmer said in Warsaw. He spoke of the great history of friendship, talking of Polish pilots who, of course, gave their lives in the World War II. A great many Allied pilots were Polish, and they gave a tremendous amount of service. Our two countries have never been closer, apparently, was his sentiment. Sir Keir Starmer's talking there. Let's see what he has to say. English
meeting
answer.
that happened the other day is vitally important. That isn't about creating armies. It's about how we share our security concerns and build on what we've already got. And that's why I think it was so important for Poland in the presidency of the EU to focus on security, because I think if you ask the question, what is the issue of our times in 2025? It is surely security in terms of the threat we face and the actions that we have to take. And that is why, in addition to those discussions the other day, I'm very pleased that we are going further with our bilateral relationship on defence, which we want to be ambitious about, we want to make real progress on quickly, and we want to make sure is as deep and as broad as possible. A partnership between the closest of allies on all the threats that we face, whether that's Putin, whether that's the gangs that are driving the vile migration trade, or whether it's the threat in relation to energy. So this is not about creating an army. It is absolutely about deepening and strengthening the work that we have to do to meet the security threats that are facing us right now. Thank you.
Mamy tu identyczne zdanie. Jesteśmy jednymi z najważniejszych uczestników paktu.
Okay, so we have a situation here where questions are being asked in Polish, and of course Sir Keir Starmer has an interpreter in his ear and he's answering in English. The previous question there was clearly talking about, is there a prospect of a Polish and British army? Because, of course, Britain, Sir Keir Starmer has made the pledge to put British soldiers in Ukraine on that corridor against what he calls the threat of the East, the eastern flank, working together to support Ukraine. The question was, are there plans for a Polish-British army? He said no, it won't be an army, but security is the issue of our times. The bilateral defence partnership on all threats, Vladimir Putin, gangs driving the vile human trafficking trade, and also energy. So this bilateral agreement is not one of a new army. Of course, many people have been talking about, will there be a EU army, a European army? Do you remember Nick Clegg called that a dangerous fantasy to Nigel Farage in the Brexit years, and yet the European Union blatantly would like its own army. The question there was, would there be an army involving Britain and Poland? Keir Starmer appeared to say no. Donald Tusk, a man who loves the sound of his own voice, he's back in his flow here. So let's go back to what Sir Keir Starmer said in his speech earlier. He talked very, very movingly about his trip to Auschwitz, of course, the Nazi concentration camp within Poland, as others were too. He said this month is the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. He talked about his visit there earlier on. Of course, worldwide, very, very moving place. He said, I looked at the shoes, I looked at the hair, I looked at the teeth. I'll never forget what I saw today. And I'll make sure that it is my job as a custodian of peace to make sure that this never, ever happens again. Never again, he said. That is our duty now, and that is our duty always. There'll be words of comfort, no doubt, to Britain's Jewish population at a time where we are seeing, I'm afraid, record levels of soaring anti-Semitism on our streets in the wake of October the 7th, 2023. It's a huge problem domestically, perhaps. Sir Keir Starmer may be inspired by what he's seen in Poland to come back and do something about that. Of course, all eyes will be on what Donald Trump, not Donald Tusk, Donald Trump starts to put the wheels in motion as of Monday. Expected to make huge demands to NATO nations to cough up perhaps as much as 5% of gross domestic product. There are very, very few nations that currently do anywhere near that. 3%, actually, the highest input is from Greece. And Poland paves their way. Perhaps the shadow of being invaded from the east has always been very, very high on them because of their geographical status, as indeed Greece was occupied by the Nazis. But the rest pay nowhere near that. We're expected to see the Germans ask to cough up a lot more, the French and all the nations. Will they be able to afford it at a time where the European economy seems to be spiralling out of control? For anybody who says we should be going back towards the European Union, look at the state of play in Germany. Spiralling towards recession. Trade tariffs from Donald Trump. Donald Trump has said he despises, openly despises the European Union and what it stands for. And will Sir Keir Starmer be more aligned with Brussels? Will actually the opportunity lie with a deal with Washington DC?
Can respond to such threats as affecting
Live translation here.
It can also set an example for Europe. If everyone cooperated like Britain and Poland, then that sense of threat will be notably lower. I am certain that in the coming months, not in the coming years, but months, London and Warsaw will successfully convince everyone that NATO and Europe is capable of effective and independent self-defense, of discouraging any aggressors to attack us and our allies. The next question, please.
Good evening, Krystyna Piczkur, Polskie Radio. I have a question actually for Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Yesterday you were visiting Kyiv and you said that Great Britain is planning to provide Kyiv with a loan of more than $2 and $6 billion. And that those money will be paid back not by Kyiv but from the interest on Russian frozen assets. So here is my question. From your point of view, what future those frozen Russian assets on the West can face under the presidency of Donald Trump? Thank you so much.
Well, look, thank you very much. What I said yesterday about the financial commitment was part of a wider argument where we share our analysis and share our view, which is what makes this relationship so valuable and strong, which is that we must put Ukraine in the strongest possible position. And that is vital now, and that we must never accept an argument that now is the time to let up, now is the time to double down. And it was in that context I was talking about capability, I was talking about training, munitions, etc. And this question of the financing that is necessary, and making the point that the finance that we were discussing yesterday will be loans that are repaid, as I said yesterday, not by Ukraine, but from those Russian assets. And we're already making great progress on this with our EU partners, with Poland, and I think the principle there is the right principle, and that money will therefore be available, and it's vitally needed at the moment. So we're making good progress on it. Thank you.
I kolejne pytanie.
The next question, please.
Will Vernon, BBC. A question for the British Prime Minister. Donald Trump has suggested that Ukraine's use of Western-supplied long-range missiles to hit targets deep inside Russia was a mistake. He called it crazy. You gave Ukraine permission to use those weapons, so what's your response to Mr. Trump? And also, Prime Minister, just while I got this opportunity to ask you about grooming gangs, was the government pushed into announcing this audit into grooming after Elon Musk got involved? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. In relation to the first issue, you will understand why I won't engage in detailed discussion about capability in relation to our support for Ukraine. We are providing capability of many different types. We are cooperating with those in Ukraine and our allies that are supporting the defence of Ukraine, and that support goes across a number of fronts. So it is really important for me not to discuss the particular capabilities in question, nor to provide a running commentary on other allies. I think it's absolutely clear that the US is vital to the defence of Ukraine. I think we should pay tribute to the role the US has played, and we work with them on a daily basis and will continue to do so. On the second aspect of the grooming gangs, look, we are continuing to work with victims. This is something that's been going on for a very long time. Personally, I've been involved in this for well over a decade, so we'll continue to put that support in for victims. The absolute imperative is action, and action on behalf of victims, and that's always been the approach that has driven the decisions that I take. Thank you.
I poproszę o zadanie ostatniego pytania.
And time for the last question, please.
Catherine Forster, GB News. Prime Ministers, you've both been on something of a journey with your views on migration. You were both opposed to Brexit, but one of the things that people who voted for that were promised was control of our borders, which Britain has very obviously failed to get. Now, why should anybody believe that you can in fact smash these gangs, given we don't seem to have any effective deterrent, given the numbers of people who clearly would love to come and live in Europe and in Britain specifically? And just to pick up on that previous question, surely you will concede there is a link in terms of the timing between your action on grooming gangs and Elon Musk's interventions. Thank you.
To nie jest oczywiście moje zadanie, ale muszę powiedzieć, opierając się na faktach, że skuteczna walka z nielegalną migracją to nie są hasła, slogany, ani ksenofobia, tylko to jest zestaw konkretnych
It is about a set of concrete decisions that are being taken in Poland.
Mówiła Pani o tym, że jednym ze źródeł Brexitu
You mentioned one of the sources of Brexit
była słabość rządów
That source was the weakness of European governments, including the British government, in combating illegal migration, and the Eurosceptical narrative, not just in Britain, was founded on the conviction that liberal democracies, that the European Union are not capable of a sound response to illegal migration. They're not capable of counteracting it. You know far better than me in Britain that Brexit had different consequences. However, it did not turn out to be a remedy to illegal migration. In Poland, we took hard actions on our border. This is a different issue because we have a land border. This is an important lesson to all of Europe, I believe. It should be an important lesson to liberal democracies around the world. If we don't want to give up these issues to radicals, to extremists, to populists, then we must find the right responses, so that no one in the world doubts that democratic states are capable of effectively defending themselves against illegal migration. In Poland, we have very concrete policies. We have a more stringent visa policy, and we suspended the right to asylum in all cases where we are dealing with mass violations of the border, trespassing of the border orchestrated by Belarus and Russia. Everyone in Europe today can see that these actions are bringing about the right effects. Today, Poland's eastern border is crossed by 10 times fewer illegal migrants than in the times where these decisions were not in force, when these decisions were missing. I've been doing this for years. I've been encouraging certain actions. I've been encouraging Europe to take this duty seriously, and I will continue to do this. It is not the case that the extreme right has a monopoly for the right answers on this issue, because that is not true. No government is relieved of this duty, irrespective of its ideological sources. No government is relieved of the duty to protect its territory and borders. This needs to be a clear principle in the Western world. Protecting your own territory and borders against illegal migration also is a sacred obligation of every government and state. As we have experienced the weaponization of migration by different regimes, in our case, the regimes of Putin and Lukashenko, we need to have resolve and be determined. Sorry for a lengthy answer. I remember that debate. I was greatly engaged in explaining the situation during the Brexit referendum. I attempted to explain that governments do not have to be helpless in the face of illegal migration. That is not true. We do not need radical or extreme solutions to be effective in protecting our citizens, our borders and our territory. In some cases, liberal democracies need a harder approach than people believe is necessary or possible. In Poland, we will certainly display resolve. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Security is obviously the key issue that we're discussing this evening. It was the issue at the heart of our discussions earlier on today, and it's the focus of the presidency of Poland of the EU. Security obviously matters for defence, it matters for the economy, but it also matters for borders. And that is why this is such an important issue. And in relation to the United Kingdom, nobody should be making that journey across the Channel in small boats. And it's our duty to provide serious answers to what is a serious problem. What we had from the last government was a gimmick, the Rwanda scheme. That cost £700 and only a handful of volunteers ever were removed. And a gimmick doesn't work as a deterrent, and we saw that very clearly with the Rwanda scheme, which is why we're determined to have a serious response to a serious challenge. And I don't accept the argument that is put to me that we can take down gangs who are terrorist gangs. I've done that myself when I was chief prosecutor. That we can take down gangs who are running guns or drugs. I've done that myself as a chief prosecutor. But the only gangs that apparently are untouchable and we can't take down are the gangs that are running this vile smuggling trade. I've never accepted that. Because I think a lot of the powers and techniques that we've used in relation to other gangs can be used for these gangs, and that's why we're taking measures to use what were traditionally counter-terrorism powers against these gangs, and in recent weeks introducing our plans for a sanctions regime which is modelled on what we do in relation to terrorists, and there's been a significant number of arrests in recent weeks as well. So I don't accept that that can't be done. And yes, it is a deterrent because these gangs are doing this to make money. If we break their ability to do that, that is a very important deterrent. And equally important is the deterrent of knowing that if you get to the United Kingdom and you shouldn't be there, you're going to be returned. And it needs to be emphasised that in the months that we've been in government, we've returned 16,400 people to their countries of origin because they shouldn't be in the United Kingdom. Record numbers on the flights, and that's the highest rate of return for over 10 years. So a serious problem requires a serious response, and a serious response is a deterrent, but a gimmick isn't a deterrent. That was tried, it didn't work, it was a waste of taxpayers' money, and we're not prepared to waste taxpayers' money on a gimmick that doesn't work. In relation to grooming gangs, look, the focus for me has always been on victims. This is, unlike the Leader of the Opposition, who discovered this issue just a few weeks ago for the first time, having never previously mentioned it in Parliament in 8 long years, I've actually been tackling this and challenging this since the days when I was Chief Prosecutor in England and Wales. My focus has always been on victims, and we were already taking measures. The measures that are announced this week aren't in isolation. We're already taking measures on mandatory reporting, for example, that were one of the recommendations of a previous report. But as I said earlier, my focus remains absolutely on the action that we need to take to protect victims. There are very many outstanding recommendations from reports, including mandatory reporting, which was a recommendation to the last government, and for all they're now saying, they never actually implemented it. We're getting on and implementing it, and that is because we're focused on the victims. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dziękuję bardzo.
Thank you very much.
Dziękujemy Państwu. Dobrego wieczoru.
Thank you very much. Good.
Okay, there we go. So Keir Starmer and Donald Tusk just finished that press address there. The final question, I think, has to be said, not being biased, the most insightful, was from Catherine Forster from GBNews. She asked both of them there. She said, you both oppose Brexit, and Britain has failed to control its borders since. Why should anybody believe that you can smash the gangs? Donald Tusk, who I did warn you likes to speak in paragraphs or indeed operas, let alone sentences, went into what I would say was a very strong case for populism. He basically said that it was not xenophobic to control your borders. We came with a set of concrete solutions. The source was the weakness of European countries, including Britain, to control its borders. Liberal democracies have failed. They are not capable of strong control of borders. Brexit did not turn out to be a remedy to immigration control. He was absolutely correct. In Poland, we took strong action, and we have a land border. Of course, a barbed wire watchtower border with Belarus came into power. Will any of this rub off on Keir Starmer, who, when he was asked by Catherine Forster, was it only because of Elon Musk you've taken notice of a grooming gang solution? He then went to talk about it's about mandatory reporting. I don't think we got very much out of Keir Starmer there. That's me done. Up next is Jubes & Co. There's an exclusive with Catherine Birbalsingh with Miriam Cates. I'll see you back on Monday. We've got a Donald Trump special inauguration. Have a great weekend.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Big problems in Aberdeenshire to the southwest of Peterhead tonight. A serious collision which continues to be investigated close as the A90 through Longhaven. On Merseyside at Wallasey, the Wallasey Dock link north, that's still closed for a police investigation off the Bolton Bridge Road. And the Surrey stretch of the M25 is currently blocked anti-clockwise just after junction 6 at the Godstone turn-off. There's been a crash involving a couple of vans and a car in the roadwork section. In northwest London at Kilburn, the A5 Kilburn High Road stays closed after a fire broke out in a building. Down in East Sussex, northwest of Heathfield, the A267 is closed on Wellbrook Hill at 5 Ashes after a car and a van collided and oil spillage was involved. And buses replaced trains out of Nottingley to Wakefield, Westgate and Castleford because of problems with the signals. And that's very latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Don't miss your chance to win our biggest cash prize ever. An incredible £50,000. That's tax-free cash to spend on anything you like this year. What would you spend it on? £50,000 could buy those treats you've always dreamed of having. And just one entry into the Great British Giveaway really could make £50,000 cash all yours. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5. £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing